All right. I think we have the 13 participants in. And Alyssa, have we allowed attendees in yet? Okay. Well, we'll just start the meeting then at this point. Welcome everybody. We have another virtual city council meeting. This is a regularly scheduled meeting. We have first on the agenda, review of regular session agenda. I think most people are muted right now. So if you want to unmute and see if you have any issues with the agenda this evening or questions.
I don't have any. I guess maybe just when I talked to Gretchen, who just popped in here too, about the planning item, I think item 12, but I guess we're going to take public comment and that's all we're going to do tonight. Is that right?
Yeah, so what we're doing to try to make this as fair as possible is that you'll see staff presentation, the appellant's presentation. You can ask questions like you normally would. We're going to open the public hearing and take comments, but then we're going to leave it open so that people can supply comments electronically, email or whatever, until the next regular council meeting, where we'll read those into the record and then close the public hearing and you guys will take action on it. It's just a way to ensure the public has the best opportunity possible to interact on the planning items.
Okay.
Any other issues for the agenda this evening? Okay, seeing none. Hearing.
And then just a note, Jonathan, on the executive session, we can talk about it when we get in there, but there is one item that we're going to take last so that Charlie can jump off.
Okay. All right, if there's no other questions, comments about the agenda this evening, let's go to council comments.
Hand raise. Wait, where are we? I'll do this.
That's good. Yeah, do we have the hand raise available?
There we go. Where's the hand raising?
Oh, I don't know as participants that we can do that. Let's see, hang on.
Well, we're panelists. There we go. I see.
Okay.
I see hand raises.
Lower right-hand corner.
Yeah, there we go.
Go ahead, Paula.
Just a quick thing. I just got this today. Some of the other towns in the area are concerned about businesses that are filing claims because they had to close down because of the pandemic, and those insurance claims are getting denied. And so they're requesting help from our state senator, our governor, and our other people, other government officials to kind of look into this. And I think all of us got this letter, but that Bill Infante sent around. And if not, I'll share it with you. But I think it's something that we might want to discuss in the future and find out if our businesses are encountering the same thing. And I'm not, if you guys didn't get the letter, I can forward that. I think Deborah got it. So
I did.
yeah. So anyway, it's just a concern that these businesses' insurance claims are being denied as they've had to close down.
And I would imagine, yes, I know many of our businesses did not have a pandemic clause, and so they're not covered. If you guys do want to send this letter, I can go ahead and send it to you all. It's a reasonable letter to send.
Yeah, and I think we got it. I mean, we got it this afternoon. So if you haven't checked your email in the last 2 hours, you might not have seen it. Okay, so Deborah, would you send that back out to all of us just to make sure we all get it?
Yes.
Anything else, Paula?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Charlie.
Yeah, I know that I was probably one of the people that said we ought to have weekly meetings. And the week has been kind of quiet since last week, last Thursday. So I might suggest that we discontinue the weekly meetings. I'm a little concerned because it'll be 3 weeks between this meeting and our next meeting in May, but I guess that leaves the opening for a meeting if we need one in between, unless, Deborah, you think we need something in between. I think we kind of got through all the main crisis stuff, and I was worried when it first happened. I moved for that things were happening so fast we needed to be addressing them, but seems to have slowed down some.
I am comfortable that we can pull you guys together if we need to.
Are
Okay.
you concerned about when we passed this, Deborah, you said that you didn't want just random days because you needed time to put things together, and it was easier just to cancel a meeting rather than
Correct.
throwing them out there occasionally. So what is better as far as that goes?
I would think it is, if you guys know you want to meet more frequently, pick a date, go with the date you have picked. If you don't feel like there is a need for a meeting, we don't have to have it. But it's totally what you guys would like to do.
Okay.
Often you feel like you need to talk to each other, make decisions, check in. We're happy to have the meeting once a week if that works better for you guys.
I think my biggest concern right now is just, and I know you're going to fill us in on some of this during the actual meeting, but there's a lot of stuff going on as far as our budget, what's happening there, forecast, what Steve can tell us. And that's information that's important. I think that all of us are hearing, especially as you get more information and can provide that, even if it's a half an hour to share that with us. So that would be my concern.
What about if we, let me just suggest something. I've just looked at the calendar. The governor's current deadline for reopening is the 26th, isn't that right?
That's correct.
What if we had a meeting that Tuesday, the 28th as a scheduled meeting? If we need it, we can always cancel that too, but that might be when we would have, and that's about halfway between now and our next meeting on May 5th or 7th.
I would rather have a meeting before that, Charlie, and go ahead and have our meeting next week on the 23rd.
I'm fine. I just didn't know. I thought things had quieted down, so I may not need it. So I'll go with whatever the council.
Paula, though, I was hoping we were going to have a workshop or work session next meeting on the impact, so that we can see budget numbers and budget projections, things that come in. We haven't seen that yet, and talk about economic impacts and possibly incentives and things like that.
Not next week.
Deborah?
We are planning to have the budget discussion at the next regularly scheduled meeting. We need to do more work on it, but we're definitely planning on bringing that back to you guys.
I think
But
we
if
also,
we're next week's meeting, I need more time.
We won't
Well-
have numbers for next week's meeting.
Not in a meaningful fashion. We need more time to give you the projections you want and to pull together potential projects to talk to you guys about. So no.
I just feel like big decisions have already been made on staff, and it's out there in the public, and council has not had a chance to see those numbers or weigh in. So I think that's important. I don't know how the rest of council feels, but I think it's important that we can weigh in on some of these decisions, and at least at the policy level, see the numbers and see some of the projections.
That is absolutely what I would like to do at the next meeting, the next regularly scheduled meeting.
I think
just-
the other thing is we will have sales tax numbers by the next regularly scheduled meeting, at least for March, will be incomplete. It's not going to be complete. And it's not reflective of a full month of shutdown, but right now we don't have any of that.
Well, let's get some comments about this. Steve. Unmute yourself.
Unmute, yeah. I know we all want to know exactly where we're at right now, but the reality is it'll be May 20th before we get sales tax reports in that tell us really through the dead time. Even the report that we get, sales tax numbers that are coming out April 20th will not really show how deeply cut this thing goes. I actually had pretty good numbers in March that'll be reflected in that April 20 number. And it's not that March number that really is going to show us. It's going to be that April number that's not due till May 20th. So I'm okay to wait. I think that we need really not to try to pull out a crystal ball to figure this out. We're going to have some real numbers to go by.
Paula, did you?
Yeah. So are we, if we wait till May 5th, are you making no policy decisions or changes? I mean, we've already started with the staff. I'm just trying to get a sense of where council, as Shelley said, that, where is our leadership in this or just our participation?
At the next meeting, I think we're going to pull together kind of where we, still using the crystal ball a little bit, Steve, where we are, where we think we might be. And at that point, we were going to ask you guys like what projects you wanted to push off. We were going to come with a recommendation list and then talk then. I did make the staffing decisions. I did call you all and let you know I was going to do it beforehand. I just felt very strongly that we needed to do it. We couldn't wait. And, I wanted that to be on me and not on you guys. But the policy decisions, the projects, yes, the next regularly scheduled meeting, we will bring you issues to talk about.
Rick.
Unmute. There, can you hear me now? I think it's a little bit of a tough pickle for the city and city staff right now, simply because most of the budget is in personnel. And I think we need to wait until there's sort of a reasoned approach to all of this. I mean, I can't necessarily see the council saying, well, we shouldn't cut this, we shouldn't cut in this area, but we need to do more of this. I'm comfortable in thinking that probably between Steve and Deborah and Carl, that there's a lot of scenario building that's going on. And I wouldn't want to insert myself into that discussion until they're ready to really roll it out, because we're really talking about people's livelihoods, and we're talking about longevity and just a number of things that would be almost premature if we got into it too early. So that's just my idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Tony.
I agree with Rick and Charlie and Steve. Paula and Shelley, or Shelley particularly, I'm not interested in micromanaging the budget, especially without all the information. That's not our role. I particularly agree with Charlie that a meeting next week is unnecessary. Someone made that motion last week, but it was defeated. But hopefully now we can move forward without meeting every Thursday. I was going to suggest 2 weeks from today, because that would be after the governor's is talked about going into this phase 2, and we might adjust. But Tuesday, the 28th is fine, or Thursday, the 30th. It doesn't matter. But regardless, I think it's unnecessary to meet again on Thursday. This puts a lot of, you guys forget, this puts a lot of stress on staff, that they have to come to these meetings, on Alyssa, to have this every week when it's not necessary. I agree with Charlie. If things have cooled down, if things heat up, like in the pool behind me here, then definitely we can meet again at any time with a short notice. But at this point, I don't think it's necessary. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. And I guess I would agree with the sentiment that, Deborah has made the decision that she has made concerning her staff. And I don't foresee, if Deborah does not, any significant changes, whether it be, we've already done a freeze from what I understand on everything. So if Deborah, you do not anticipate additional cuts of significance in the next 3 weeks, there's not a lot for us to probably weigh in on. And I think while it would feel natural for us to have a conversation in 2 weeks because we usually meet every other week, April is one of those 5 Thursday months. And so it feels weird going from every week to now we don't have something for 3 weeks, but it looks like there's some stability, and the hard dramatic decision was already made by Deborah and run by all of us. So I think if there's daily things to make, I'm okay with you making them, Deborah. And if there's a decision that has to be made that's significant, then you should call us back for a special session. Steve Boyd.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I just wanted to jump in real quick. We don't expect to make any major decisions between now and the next regular meeting in May. We took this step just to kind of break the seal of, everybody is in it together, and we may have to share some pain among all the staff and everything. Sales tax returns are due on the 20th, but we don't charge a penalty or interest or anything for 10 days. So in reality, we don't get a lot of tax information until the end of the month, because a lot of people file right at the end of the month. So we're trying to get together a good year-to-date financial and a good list of the projects that we still think we should go forward with and which ones we should push back in the council packet that will go out a week before that first meeting in May. But between now and then, we wanted to make a decision and just kind of roll it out that would buy us the time that we need to get through the second quarter here without making any big additional decisions. So.
Thanks, Steve. Shelley, your hand's still up. Was that from previous, or do you still?
Yeah, I didn't really get my turn yet.
Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. No, I can see that the majority on council don't agree. I just feel like this is an important time for council to be on the loop on the numbers. And there's, projections that have been made on our budget going forward into 2020. And I'd like to have a good understanding of where those come from. And when we start talking projects, like Steve said, and I completely appreciate all the work that's been done on that and getting out in front of it with the staff cuts. I think those are very unfortunate, but they're also necessary. And we all need to feel the pain on that. So, but I do think it's important that council has an opportunity to see those numbers as soon as they're available, and that we can weigh in on these decisions.
All right, thank you. All right, so it sounds like the majority of council is fine with, as long as there's not significant disruption or policy governance decisions in the next 3 weeks. We're okay with having the regularly scheduled meeting the first Thursday, May 7th as our next meeting.
I guess that wasn't my original position. I thought I'd do it somewhere in mid-range and after the governor came in, because there may be things come up, there may not, but if there's not, we can cancel. But I thought we should pencil in, an hour on the 28th, and hopefully we can do it in an hour. But I'll be surprised the governor doesn't continue it, but some of his comments yesterday lead me to believe he might be starting to pull back, and we might need to begin reacting to that. So I would prefer to have one meeting between now and the May 7th.
I would support Charlie on that.
Okay.
If we can do it on a Thursday.
Well, the 30th is a Thursday, so either way.
Okay.
Okay. So is there support to have it then the April 30th? Okay, I see thumbs. Good enough. All right. Yeah. We're going to be 2 weeks from tonight.
All right.
For a special session, hopefully reacting to the governor's announcement. Rick, other comments? Other unmuted comments, I meant.
There we go. We might give some consideration to, because everybody's home, sheltered in place, to maybe moving the meeting times to the afternoon. The Garfield Library Board, of which I'm a member by certificate, had their meeting that was scheduled for tonight at 2 o'clock this afternoon. And, if we're going to be getting into meaty details and everybody's biorhythms being what they are, we might think about the potential, and I don't throw this out there as a game changer, but just sort of an idea that maybe we could look at an afternoon meeting as opposed to an evening meeting where we might be sort of wore out. But just a suggestion.
Like, I would just comment that there are a lot of people still working full time, even though it's from home. And I guess I would tend to want to stay on a regular schedule, but.
Any other comments?
I'd prefer the evening. I just have a lot going on in the daytimes.
Yeah, as the school headmaster at my house as well, the afternoons are kind of tough for me. So if we could do it in the evenings, that'd be. And I think just the public, what we're seeing is really good participation from the public in these meetings, because they don't have to get out of their house and out of their sweatpants to come to a city council meeting to participate. That's actually kind of the neat upside on this. And I would love. I guess I'll roll into one of my council comments that I didn't know I had, but I would love to find a way, because IT is not going to do anything, especially since we have a massive agenda tonight that deals with IT. But I would love if we could come out of this this stay-at-home order, and when we start to have regular council meetings, if there's a way that we could allow the public, and I don't know we can, and I don't know legally or if it's even something we want to do, but at least have the conversation if we can allow the public to participate electronically, even if we don't ever do it ourselves again. It's just been kind of nice seeing like 30 people in theory show up to these meetings. So
Yep.
I guess that's my comment. And if IT has any thoughts about that or is quietly in the corner crying, I'm sorry that I made that comment. But yeah, I think that'd be kind of cool. Any other comments?
I'll make one just to give council a heads up. When we get to our regular council comments in the session, I would like to suggest tonight that council take the same pay cut that department heads and main staff are taking, just to show solidarity on that.
I had the same thought I was going to bring up during the regular meeting, so I would support that.
Okay.
As long as it's voluntary, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, you guys don't have a real job, and a lot of you don't understand some of the financial pressures that people are under. But, if that's the decision, that's the decision.
So could we make it sort of a prorated contribution based on the minutes talking and during the meeting would sort of lower the
Mr. Voorhees.
Well, then Rick won't get paid anything. He's gonna owe us.
All right. Any other comments for the good of the order? All right. Well, it looks like we have our meeting starting in 7 minutes. So if anybody needs to, or 6 minutes now. So if anybody needs to.
There's future agendas, and I looked at the one. Sounds like it's already. There's more stuff that's planned for that was on, at least the one I looked at earlier in the week. Is there anything else major coming up at that first? We're going to have the continuation of the public hearing today, or finishing that. Is there any other major issue coming up that, Deborah, you know about in 3 weeks? I mean, because that budget stuff could take a long time.
Conversation.
Pardon?
The entire budget conversation.
Yeah, the reason I brought it up is should we meet in a work session ahead of time to talk about the budget. I'd like to keep it in the public forum because I think they need to understand it. But if I don't want to be going to 10, 11 o'clock at night if we can avoid it either.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll take a look at that and see what needs to happen that night. And then, yeah, I mean, if it makes sense to do a work session, we can try. I've been trying to keep us free of normal work sessions, but this is different.
Okay. That was my only comment about the May budget, May agenda. I didn't see that May 7th agenda. Didn't seem like there was much on there when I looked at it the other day.
Actually take action, we'd have to have it in the evening then too.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
You know, and just from a logistics standpoint, Paul, I see your hand, but I think from a logistics standpoint, at least for my opinion, this format is formal in a way that I have to call on people. We can't be talking over people, and we would probably accomplish the same thing on the quote dais that we are in a regular agenda as we would a work session. You know, the advantage of a work session, when we're sitting around the table, we can go back and forth. It can be a little more free flowing, and we just don't have that ability in this session. So I don't know logistically if it would make that much of a difference in the form, or if we were able to accomplish, but that might just be me. So I guess I'll just leave that up to folks if they feel strongly one way or the other. Paul, I saw your hand up, and sorry, I jumped in ahead of you. Do you want to comment?
I just remembered something else for a council comment, but I can do it later in the meeting. That's fine. Thanks.
I think we have a few minutes if you want to just do it now.
We have 4 minutes. I was just going to bring up that the RAFTA study is online now, and encourage people to participate in that so that we can get as much input as possible. But really, now that I think about it and I say it, I should have done it during the regular scheduled meeting.
Yeah.
I think you should. I think do it again.
I'll do it again.
Okay. Tony, you got something?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, we are on a 3-minute break, I guess.
Great.
All right, so I think we should always do all of our meetings like this from now on.
Is that because you have a drink in your hand?
No, this is tea. It's just, it seems like it's more organized. It's easier to move on down through the agenda, you know?
That's true.
Or Jonathan, we need to train him to use a mute button on the dais.
It's highly effective on just like keeping things in order, because he has to. It's actually kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
There's those peanut M&Ms.
Right.
Yeah, what's for dinner?
Paula, where do you see the RAFTA study?
I've
Oh,
just
I see.
catching it on Facebook and
Okay.
other places. It's on the city council Facebook page too. I mean, the Glenwood Springs Facebook
I
page.
wasn't on Facebook today, so
Yeah, and somebody sent me an email, and
yeah.
all this stuff kind of coming at me. I don't even know where it comes from sometimes or remember. Hey, there was a great, if anybody's into it, there was a great article today in the Wall Street Journal about economics versus the shutdown versus keeping businesses open, and kind of compared what it meant, the economic impact. We had done one or the other. It was pretty interesting. I could send it to you guys if you want by a link.
Oh, neat. Yeah.
Is it in the Wall Street Journal, you said, Paula?
It's called sorry, I'm not going to skip over this one. Epidemiology meets economics. I can send you guys a link. If you can get open
That'd be
it.
great. If you could send that around, Paula, that would be cool.
Is there a
Or send it
paywall on
to
the?
Deborah and we'll forward it on.
Is there a paywall on the journal?
There is actually, I think.
You know, I know the Post and the Times though on COVID related things has made a lot of things free. So there might be a chance that that coverage is also free.
I'll see if
Yeah,
I
I'm
can,
not sure what the journal is doing.
yeah. I'll send it around or send out, I'll figure out a way to get it to you guys.
Cool.
Okay, that'd be great.
All right. Looks like it's 6:15. Wow. On cue. Nice job, Alyssa. Catherine, would you like to take roll call for us?
Willman,
Here.
Voorhees,
Here.
Cope,
Here,
Godus,
Here.
Davis,
Here.
Beth,
Here,
Hershey.
Yes.
All right. I will be saying the Pledge of Allegiance to myself in this room on behalf of all of council and the attending public. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Any agenda changes or conflicts in the agenda that anybody has this evening? I will look for hands. Charlie.
Yeah, I have some executive session, and we talked to the earlier meeting that we'll do the thing that I'm not conflicted first, and then I'll drop out of the meeting. That'll be the last thing of the meeting, so.
Okay, we'll note that at the time too.
no
Any
comment.
other agenda changes? I do believe we have, it's noted, but item number 12, the public hearing will be open to the next regular city council meeting on May 7th, 2020. But are we still going to be, I'm sorry, are we still going to be hearing that item tonight, Carl?
Yes, let me see, hang on. That's the, I'm sorry, which, item 12, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so what you're going to do tonight is you will hear the presentations from the appellant and from staff. You will be able to ask questions like you normally would, but please, I'd refrain from making any comments or getting into that section at all. We're going to take any public comment that is online with us, but then we're going to continue and leave that public hearing open until the May 7th meeting so that people, if they want to comment, send in an email, a letter, anything, if they want to comment in some other way to be read into the record after having seen those presentations, they can do that as a way to try to make sure we've allowed as much of an opportunity for the public to comment on these public hearings as possible. And then you will, at the next meeting, we'll read those things into the record. You'll close the public hearing and then go to your questions, or then go to comments and or a motion on the appeal.
Okay. That's clear. Thank you. Okay. Next up, citizens appearing before council. These are for items not on the agenda. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. I see we have 17 attendees. Either go to participants and it should bring up the dialogue box. You can raise your hand. I can allow you to talk. If you've called in, I see one person from a 480 number. If anybody else calls in, just for your information, it is *9 to ask to talk, and I can recognize you there. So is there any public comment on items not appearing on the agenda? Face coverage is not on the agenda, so now is your time, everybody. That was a joke. Okay, that lead balloon. All right, seeing no comments and inciting none, apparently, I will bring it back to, let's see where we're at. COVID-19 updates.
With your permission, I'd like to give you guys a couple of updates. We did not receive the $25,000 grant for the community garden expansion. So I'm not quite done yet because I am worried about food insecurity. So just we'll be thinking about that and coming back, which I think was the direction I received at the time. So staff is working with the chamber.
Deborah, I'm
Yes.
sorry, can I ask, I was on a call Saturday night and there's a woman with Carbondale who does not horticulture, but it's vermiculture, not vermiculture, that's onions, or worms. She does something with planting stuff, and she lives here in Glenwood, and she said she'd be happy to talk to you. I don't know if she's contacted you or not, but maybe getting some community buy-in and community support for something like that. Has anybody contacted you?
No.
Okay.
Or if they did, I missed it, which is possible.
Okay, that's fine. I'll see if I can touch base with her and encourage her to touch base with you as well. So we can hopefully get some community members who are interested in this as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Staff is working with the chamber and the DDA to come up with options for city council to consider for a business assistance program. More to come on this at the first meeting in May, along with FAB grant recommendations. So I just want you to know that we are indeed working on this and it will be coming back to you.
Thank you.
I would like you guys to consider granting $20,000 to Lift Up for food for Glenwood Springs residents. I think this is a growing need that's just going to continue to grow. We initially did not pay out the housing stipend, which was budgeted for $120,000 out of the A&I fund for this type of need. And I think, you know, $20,000 would go a long way to beginning to help with some of the food insecurity we have going on. They normally have a budget of $55,000 for the whole year, the entire Lift Up program. And you know, they are going to blow through that very quickly as our unemployment numbers continue to rise.
I would be open to nominating something along that line, but I don't know if this is the time we would discuss it or.
I think so. Deborah, where did you say the funds would come from?
We had pulled we did not pay out the housing stipend for employees. So that was $120,000 in the A&I budget. And I'm recommending taking 20 of that and using it for this purpose. And it was something, just so you know, weeks ago, it was something staff was very supportive of when we withheld the housing stipend, because I think there's, you know, we are very lucky to still have jobs, and there are a lot of hungry people out there.
Right.
I guess I would support that for sure. I just think that I would rather, because it's a nonprofit in our community, I would rather come out of our grant process. I'm okay making the decision tonight to take the $20,000 out of the $200,000 that we usually allocate for the grants, and then just dealing out the 180 later. I'd rather not wait 3 weeks for those grants to come back for us, but that's where my preference would be as far as a fund to take it out of. Charlie.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was going to suggest, Jonathan. Steve might be able to give us an idea if we're getting any other applications in when we reopen, but there certainly is something that falls within that gambit, and one of the reasons why we decided to delay giving those grants. So I would also support coming out of the discretionary grants that the FAB normally does. I hate to take something away from that, but I agree this is urgent. So I think I would support it should come from there.
Sorry. Paula.
Question to Deborah or Steve, is this money from the housing stipend that went back into the A&I budget is that just generally available for where we need it at this point in time?
It is a benefit we withheld. Mm-hmm. So we did not spend it.
Right.
So, theoretically it is still budgeted. Now, we will have to take into consideration what our revenue numbers are actually going to be, but I felt pretty comfortable with this slice of it going, but it's totally council's decision where you want to pull the money from.
Okay.
Or if you want to do it at all.
I don't know who jumped in here first, but Rick Voorhees, your hand is raised above Steve, so you're next.
Yeah, just real quick, I know that there's some movement to taking this out of FAB money, and now there's also the possibility of this other source of money, and I think they're fungible. I think there's something that we ought to do, and I think that we could do it now and sort of worry about source of funds as we have our meeting here in several weeks about the entire budget. Thank you.
So I think I heard you say you're supportive, Rick, of getting it out, but you don't necessarily care that strongly about where it comes from. Let's just get the money out.
Exactly.
Okay. Counselor Davis.
I'm in complete support of allocating those funds, and where that money comes from, I would completely leave up to Deborah and Steve Boyd. I don't care to start micromanaging this issue. We're going to have a lot of budget issues come up, and I don't want to start making those decisions. So I rely on Deborah and Steve for that.
Tony.
What Steve said, yes.
Shelley.
I agree. Same long lines with Rick and Steve.
Okay. Deborah, do you feel like you have direction on that?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
So,
And the other thing I was just going to say is I just want to thank my employees and you guys as well, for your support and honestly, our employees were so wonderful about all the cuts. You would be extraordinarily proud of them. So just want to say thank you.
Great.
Tell them thank you for us.
And many of them are hearing you say that now. So thank you.
all right. Let's turn it over to council comments. Shelley.
And along those lines, Deborah, I know, and Steve Boyd, everyone involved, the decisions you made on pay cuts and furloughs over this last week were very difficult, and very much appreciate staff for all the sacrifices they're making, and you, Deborah, and department heads, everyone. I think very strongly that we're all in this together, and likewise for council to show also that we're in this and part of this and show solidarity with staff. I would propose that we also see the same pay cut levels that department heads are seeing. So I would like to put that out there to council, that we also take the pay cut, and we don't get paid the big bucks on this job, but we do get paid, and it's significant, and whatever we can contribute to the budget cuts as we need to, I'd like to do that at this time. So.
And, I'll just jump in and as my daughter leaves her room, I'll just jump in and say that I've probably spoken with everybody, and this is a conversation that everybody has brought up with me specifically of, we're not exempt from, we're the leaders of this community. Deborah led out first, I believe, with the conversation of here's what I'm going to do. And then the conversation about now here's what I'm asking my employees to do. So this is something that was on all of our mind. And I think we arrived at all of these decisions in our own way. And I don't know that we all agree that we should do this, but I see every hand up, so it'll be everybody's opportunity to either affirm or disagree. So thank you, Shelley. And we're still in council comments, and your comments do not have to reflect this specific topic, but if you want to weigh in as well, that'd be great. Charlie. You're muted.
Sorry about that. I'd echo the comments that Shelley made. I think the staff has done a phenomenal job since this all started back in early March. And I want to congratulate Deborah and the executive staff, as well as all the employees, for the fine job they've done in dealing with the issues that we have to deal with. We still have to run the city. We have to make sure that streets are hopefully start to be repaired as we get people out, even with the restrictions, and do those things. And I know it's tough. I would move that the council take a 20% cut until the financial conditions change in their monthly salaries.
I would second that.
All right, there is a motion on the floor made by Charlie, seconded by Rick. Further discussion. Steve.
Yeah, everybody stole my motion, and I thought Shelley was actually at 10, but I'm okay with 20. And you know, Deborah said it to her message to staff. We're all in this together, so I think we all have to join in that same regard.
Okay, Tony.
I was going to ask about something else. You know, Mr. Godis, I've been told by the city manager that I'm a city councilman 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm also a deputy district attorney 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, especially when I'm on call. And I think you've always wanted, Jonathan specifically wants to encourage people to run. And that's why I think it was Catherine Trauger's council, and you'll remind me, Mr. Godis, what that was, that raised the salary from 500 to 1,000. Aspen city councilmen make a lot more. I mean, I'm fine with, I would prefer 10% or 20%. It's pretty symbolic on $1,000 a month with your take home pay of, what is it, like $464 with taxes. You're talking about $40 or $80. Not a big deal, but I'm not going to vote no on this. I'd make an alternative motion if Steve would support that for 10%, because, you know, it's not, I'm in a different position than some of you on council. I'm a little bit in, you know, supporting some other people and doing some other things. So, but it's not going to break me $80 a month, or if you cut it totally and we didn't take pay for the next 6 months. But I think what we do is important too. What Deborah does is important. What Steve Boyd does is important. What the policeman on the street does is important. I hate to cut anybody's salary, but, you know, we are where we are, and with 50% revenues, maybe we should make it 50%. I don't know why we'd say 20%. I think Shelley just pulled that out of thin air. So I would prefer 10, or make it 50. I don't care, but I'm going to support whatever you guys decide. Thank you.
Any other council comments? Paul. Hey, you're muted. There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to again reiterate how appreciative we are of what the city staff has sacrificed. This is a tough time, and as Deborah noted, they have jobs, which is great, but it still takes a lot for somebody to look at their checkbook and go, especially when you're looking at not the heads of department, though I appreciate that there as well, but when you look at some of your entry-level employees, or, you know, that's a difference. That makes a difference on how they pay their rent this month and things they do with their families. So all of you, I just want you to say how much I really appreciate the sacrifice that you're making, not trying to take away from what the heads of departments are doing as well. But I just truly appreciate people's, I don't know, just they're incredible. So that's all I want to say.
Can I get my Trump check first, though, Mr. Mayor? I'm just kidding. I'm still.
You know, and thanks for that, Paula. You know, like I think I've said my story a few times that I was one of these people that got laid off from Aspen, 12 years ago, and it was, well, 2009, and it was really, really difficult having a young child and a pregnant wife to get laid off. And so I often wondered, what if City Council and the city manager had been more proactive a year before, 6 months before? Would it have had to come down to that? And I view these, while it's painful, it's painful in a way that is, it's tough, but it hopefully is going to be, especially with some of the payroll protection and unemployment claims that people can handle. I really do feel for our part-time workers, because I'm sure a lot of them, this is their second job or one of 3 jobs that they kind of cobble together. And so not having that is going to be really, really difficult, even if they do qualify for some unemployment benefits. So it's not easy for anybody. We've all been through recessions, and probably all at some point in our lives have had decisions like this put upon us. So it seems like we should share in the pain as well, even though it's more symbolic, because our pay honestly is pretty symbolic. So we have a motion, and I can come back to if we want to get off of this topic and somebody wants to bring up other council comments, but let's take the vote on this. So
Before we do this, is it voluntary, and did Steve want to make a counter motion for 10%? Are we doing 20? Are we doing more? And is it voluntary? Because my understanding under the city charter is it's completely up to us. We could take no money, but how's it working? Because this motion to me is not clear before I vote.
Yeah, so Charlie made the motion. Charlie, is this one for all for one, or is this just whatever we all want to pitch in?
No, it was my intent that we all agree, and with the motion, if it's approved, we'd all would agree to it's to be May 1st. I think we just got a paycheck today, for lack of a better term, but so it would start for the month of May, but it would be 20%, which is for me is $200. I know the mayor's a little bit more because he makes a lot more money than we do.
But Charlie, I'm not clear on the timing. The governor's about to reopen the state at the end of the month, but we're going to have budget issues for the next year or two. So is this indefinite? I mean, I think when people are considering whether they're going to run next April, people need to know.
My motion was until the financial situation improves.
That makes no sense. So I want a specific date, please, or I can't.
If I may, maybe you run it concurrent with what is in the proposed amendment to Deborah's contract, which is December 31st.
Yeah.
And Tony, I'd appreciate it if you could raise your hand so we don't get into a back and forth. Thank you. So
I accept Carl's amendment to the end of the year, unless things improve before then.
Okay. Rick, do you accept as a seconder that amendment?
Yeah, I certainly do. That makes sense.
Okay. Let's call the vote. Catherine.
Voorhees? Voorhees?
Yes.
Willman?
Yes.
Cope?
Yes.
Hershey?
Yes.
Davis?
Yes.
Depp?
Yes.
Otis?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Next item. Well, just real quick, other council comments. Paula, sorry, I missed you.
I just wanted to remind everybody out there listening to this and in all of Glenwood Springs that right now the City of Glenwood Springs on their Facebook page has a link to the RAFTA study. The RAFTA study gives you an opportunity for the community members to tell what they would like to see as far as our transportation needs. And there's an introduction video. I would suggest watching that before you start the study so you get a better picture of it, and then give us your comments on what you'd like to see with transportation in the town of Glenwood.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. We do have to remember that at some point life is going to go on, and I think we do have to realize that at some point the economic activity and the traffic is going to come back to our community, and it's important for people to weigh in. And it's tough right now to think of, oh, I'm going to be part of a study group, or I'm going to show up to this. But people can take those surveys and participate on any online meetings. It's very helpful to us now, because we will be making decisions in the next year or 2 years based on this information gathering we're doing right now. So let's hopefully get the word out and not let this opportunity pass us by. Okay, any other comments? All right. Hearing none, we will start to go into discussion on implementation schedule for broadband. Item number 8. Who is presenting this, Mr. Langhorse?
I will be presenting this one, but we also have Michael Gardner, our broadband superintendent, on the phone, and then Dave from Uptown is also on the phone. And I apologize, I have 3 screens going on in the Roman Theater behind me, so don't let me looking around distract you on this one. We were discussing internally how to move forward with broadband. We went out for an RFP. We'll discuss that a little later, but what we've found is that our messaging for people is a little bit tough at this point. We have this plan for moving forward in 2020. We have the ability to do that. We have a contractor willing to do that. We have materials being purchased and everything's moving forward with that. But what we're finding is hard is we have 5 more phases coming in the next 5 years. And what we thought is, okay, this RFP for financing is basically a $9 million lump sum. We're not moving money from other locations year by year to accommodate for paying for broadband to be installed. So why not look at doing this thing in a 2-year process and getting everything up and running, getting it by everybody in the next 2 years, and making the messaging easier for us and more understandable for the community. And then also having those potential revenues, those pass-by revenues come in the door quicker than spreading out that potential build out over a 5-year process. There are a lot of other things that go into it, but basically that's the kind of the 2 things is we have contractors that are going to move very, very quickly on phase 1. And we might even be able to expand phase 1 into phase 2 in 2020, depending on the circumstances where COVID goes, what the construction schedule would be based on restrictions for COVID. As long as we're kind of moving out of this, it's looking a little more friendly, but we are moving forward with other construction projects. We're doing it successfully. We've been working with Gould for a week and a half now up on Cedar Crest. They're all wearing masks. They're all social distancing as much as possible. Everything's been working out really well. Rain and snow are not convenient, but most of the construction process at this point are doing well. And we would like to move that forward with broadband also. Get that going as soon as we possibly can, get phase 1 going, get a good time frame of what phase 1 will take us. And if council is open to it, shortening that 5-year time frame down to potentially 2 years. And I know the staff report said instead of doing this through 2025, it may be 2020 through 2022, the beginning of. We don't know exactly what that is without sitting down with the contractor. We didn't want to pull them fully into that conversation until we have them under contract. But it seemed viable from our consultant's point, our point, and probably the contractor's point that a lot of this work is fairly simple for them to do. It's not ripping a road out and putting a road back, which is complicated with traffic control and everything else along with it. It's pulling wire from point A to point B, sometimes having to put a boring in to go across the road, those kinds of things, but it's not quite as labor and time intensive as you would think a construction project may be. So we wanted to reach out to you guys and see what your thoughts are. Instead of sitting on the 9 million over the 5-year period, let's get it up, get it going, shorten soft costs, get more revenues coming in the door quicker as possible. I know we had put the pro forma up there, and that is extremely complicated. And I apologize to Paula that thing broke into 92 pages instead of what it was supposed to be. Just how Civic Clerk handled it. But we did put up a very short version of what the build comparison financial overview would be. And it's not a huge cost savings, but if you go all the way to the bottom and kind of look at minimum cumulative cash from 2 years to 5 years, if we did it faster, the cumulative cash at the end of the period is $700,000 to $800,000 in actual, we'll call it profit, that we wouldn't have in the other scenario. That can be put back at the loan in a greater quantity to pay it off quicker. It can be sitting there as cumulative cash at the end of the day for in further expansion or capacity or capital improvements. We have a lot of flexibility, I guess, is my point, is we're looking at more money coming in at a faster rate. It gives us more flexibility to work with. So that's kind of my spiel. I kind of want to hear what your thoughts were on it.
All right. Let's hear our thoughts on that. Charlie, you're first up, and then Rick.
Matt, I don't understand how we're going to build this in 2 years. So it's been the question when I read it. it just doesn't make sense how we get that amount of construction done in 2 years. And maybe I'm expecting more excavating there's going to be. Maybe it's more going to be on poles than I thought. But I know originally we talked about putting conduit in whenever we do a road and eventually getting it all in. I'm thrilled if we can do it. Anyway, that's what I need.
So to answer that question really quick, we're only putting conduit in where it makes sense. Like Cedar Crest, we're ripping the entire subdivision apart. So we're going to put in Broadband's own fiber and conduit lines. Everywhere else in town that doesn't have one of those projects at this point is an overbuild on the electric system where we already have poles and conduits. We already have transformers and vaults. So we'll basically be pulling fiber along with the electric system within the conduits we already own. When we hit vaults, we'll pull it out of the vaults, set up our own pedestals for the fiber optic. And this is a basic overview. I apologize. We can get much more in depth if you want to, but we're overriding the electric system. So we don't have to dig a whole lot. If we find a piece of conduit from point A to point B is impassable for whatever reason, we may have to dig a trench next to the electric system and put in another conduit just for the fiber optic system. But in most cases, we feel pretty comfortable that we're going to be able to just overlay the entire fiber optic system on our electric system without having to do a ton of excavation and trenching. We do have borings. They're already kind of laid out in Uptown's proposals. So if we don't have a conduit from one side of the street to the other where we would like one, we'll bore across the street. But those are fairly simple and mundane things to do. It's not a brand new conduit system within the city of Glenwood Springs, except for when we can join in with a Cedar Crest project, which makes sense. We will be doing that. So from here on out, over the next 2 years, we'd basically just be installing over our electric system.
Well, my second question go with that is, we're borrowing $9 million, but if I remember the numbers, and I looked at it a couple of days ago, so I may not have this right, but we're spending about maybe $700,000 between the software and the construction contract with the light company. I can't think of the name of the company. Why we borrow $9 million, and I know what that means. The answer is that's only part of the project. So are we going to be getting more contracts throughout this year?
So the RFP that we put out for the contract for labor allows us to extend that contract if we want to for the entire build out, for phases of the build out. Basically, it gives us the leeway to decide what we would like to do with that contractor at the end of the day. The contractor we have chosen was significantly less than the other people were proposing on this thing. And they're also quote unquote, they're kind of a local contractor. I believe they're out of Paonia. So they're willing to move and they're willing to have discussions on if we want to go further.
So we have a item or per foot cost or something like that that we can extend without knowing, so we know what it would cost.
Correct.
So how much of the city will be covered by this particular contract? What percentage? Or
approximately 10%.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Charlie. Rick, you're next, followed by Paula. And you're muted, Rick. And you're still muted.
There we go.
There you go. There you go.
Sometimes it's a blessing to be muted when you're talking. So I just wanted to ask Matt, and maybe this is Mr. Gardner can comment on this too. We've had a history of providing broadband, at least downtown, and it has been cost effective, I believe. Do you expect that what we're putting forth here tonight is something that will also be not of a cost to taxpayers?
So the intent of the broadband department itself was to either fix what we have, which would be extremely expensive to do, bail on the whole entire thing and let people just figure out what to do with it, or move forward with an expansion of the project. And we would be competing. This is us competing. It's not like electric or water or sewer. It's broadband competing against other providers, the Comcast, the CenturyLinks, out there in the world that are in the city of Glenwood Springs right now. But the intent of the project is to be a standalone department, just like electric, water, and sewer, which is why the revenue has to exceed the cost of the department fees, so that it is a standalone department. It does not cost the taxpayers anything. At the end of the day, what it does is provides them high-speed, reliable internet to their homes or businesses or institutions, which we cover a lot of institutions and businesses right now. We're trying to expand that out to provide that residential service to everyone that wants it. And I think that this epidemic is a great example of why this is such a great project. I have been on a lot of Zoom calls with people, and don't take these offensively, I won't even say names, in other communities, and they have dropped, and they have had issues with internet connectivity throughout this whole entire 3 or 4 weeks we've been doing this. And I really appreciate sitting in City Hall right now and having an extremely clear picture, being able to see you guys perfectly, not have any Zoom problems, and be able to continue to do my work as I need to with all the reliability in the world. So yes, it's intended to be a standalone department. Steve can speak up, but it probably would be broken off into its own enterprise fund. Currently, it lives within the electric department, but is intended to be a standalone department that is self-sufficient and not taxpayer funding based.
Exciting. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Rick. Paula, and then Shelley.
Just a little more clarity, Matt, on the coverage. You said 10% of the city, and I'm assuming you mean 10% of the population. Can you give me a sense of, if we do this $9 million and we do it in 2 years, what's the geographic coverage of this? Are we like in South Park? Are we in my neighborhood? Are we over by Jonathan's neighborhood? Are we in West Glenwood? I'm trying to get a sense of what that coverage is with that.
So I'll answer that for this year. So what we're looking at is about 13 miles of cable going out this year. The city itself, the design's around 150 miles. And Michael isn't speaking up, but he's feeding me information over here. Just to make sure I'm right on this thing. This year it'd be about 800 passings, which means we would go by 800 businesses and residents. There's about 4,800 passings within the entire project build out. So we're 1/6 of the entire community, with less than 10% of the cable going in, because we'd be doing kind of downtown, east side of town. So 7th Street down to, I think, 14th or something like that, from Grand over to the Lincoln area. We'd be doing slightly outside of city limits over in West Glenwood. We'd be doing Cedar Crest. We'd be doing Park West. You know, we're trying kind of almost all of the areas in town where they give us, we're going to be forced to kind of deal with different situations. So aerial, underground, new construction, some borings. We're trying to get a good sense of how this is going to go as a global thing with a 10% kind of view of it. So, you know, the full build out is basically city limits with a little bit into West Glenwood. It's actually technically Garfield County. We wouldn't be going up the 4-mile corridor right now. We don't have great capacity up there to go easily. But we do in the electric system go all the way up to Dry Park, basically, with our electric system. So build out is everybody within the city of Glenwood Springs. You can see that's 4,800 passings. If you look at apartments, MDUs, those kinds of things, I think we're in, you know, the 5,500, 5,500 or 5,200, 5,500, you know, potential units. If we were to build out entire city of Glenwood Springs electric department, we get into 6,000s. But we're also looking at how to supplement to make kind of Rick's question more balanced out, and helping the County Eagle potentially if they move forward, depending on how this COVID affects them. You know, so there's a lot of ways for us to reach out and create revenue for this department and still help. Globally, we're talking, you know, maybe Garfield County, maybe Pickens County, City of Aspen, to make it a very viable project for us. But the main goal is to bring this to the citizens of the city of Glenwood Springs, maybe including the rest of the electric department boundary, which is larger than the city. Does that answer your question?
Just a little more clarity. So in 2 years, you expect to accomplish all of this if we go for the 2-year plan? For
That
all within the city?
that would be our goal. And you have to think of it as like Gould. Right now, they are working on a water line in a subdivision. They have 2 different crews working 2 different directions. The city is so big and so little traffic control is needed for these operations for installation that there's the potential we could have 4 or 5 or 6 different crews working on different areas of the city doing installs. And the bore crew goes over here and does their work. The pole crew goes here. The guys that are hanging on the lines are in a different area. The limitations will be amount of manpower we can basically throw at it versus time.
Okay, so one other question, and I don't know if it's in part 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these, but it kind of ties into this. It felt like the licensing said that it would only be for 2,500 customers. Did I misread that in a later piece? And that was for the software part of what we were putting together to, is it?
That would be, the licensing was basically shooting for phase 1 and phase 2 of the project. We can
Okay.
always add more with this vendor. That wasn't really, the licensing isn't, the amount of customers available to go onto the system isn't the limitation by any means. We were just looking at phase 1 and phase 2 with Great Lakes to get us going on the project. And then we would have to up the licensing once we went into phase 3, 4, and 5. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Shelley, further questions? It'd be unmute, Shelley.
Me. Okay, sorry. I think Paula covered most of my questions. So Matt, but just for clarification again, the only kind of question I had was understanding, would this be then the contractor that would be hired to come in, and capacity wise, you feel like you can get this done in 2 years? Again, as a goal, I realize, but.
So yeah, we definitely need to sit down with Lightworks and have a more robust conversation with the current restrictions with COVID-19. We haven't been able to kind of do that. Plus, we wanted to kind of get your feeling before we even thought about having that conversation. We haven't awarded them a contract.
Right.
I'd love to award it to them first and then start discussing with them the options for expanding that contract and what they could do for us.
Okay.
So I kind of, this is a little bit of cart before the horse, but it was broadband day. So we're having broadband day.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Rick, another question.
Yeah, just real quick, and I don't know if this is a Matt question or a Deborah question, but have we looked for any outside help financially with this project?
Do you want to answer?
You have to unmute yourself, Deborah. There you go.
Yes. Yes, we had a conversation yesterday with the EDA and AGNC as well. We are probably going to go after a couple $1 million to help with this project. There's money from the CARES Act that it will overlap nicely with. There are no promises on that, but we will definitely try.
Okay. So, and for the benefit for our audience at home, can you spell out those acronyms in case somebody really wants to Google this?
Give me a chance to look them up. Yes. Matt, do you remember what EDA?
I remember his name was Trent.
I remember his name was Trent, too.
Economic Development Authority.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that right? I just guessed at that.
Sounds right.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Well, you're a veritable thesaurus there, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
With the current stimulus packages and some of the COVID thing going on, they seem to be looking at their grants in a different way, and they're kind of opening them up a little bit more. which gives a great opportunity. And we have perfect timing because we can basically answer all of their questions right now.
Right.
You know, people love those shovel ready projects. We're not just shovel ready. We're ready to pull wire.
Wow, that's great.
It's a
Thank
very
you.
helpful conversation. And it was the Economic Development Administration.
Administration.
So close.
Close.
It's just administer stuff. It doesn't have authority over anything, apparently. Paula, you need to unmute yourself. Oh, good. You got it. Sorry.
That's okay. No, so Deborah, how does that overlap with the loan, the $9 million loan? If we can get one or two or all of these grants, do we just pay off the loan early? Is that what we're looking at?
I would say that is a Steve question.
Yeah, I'm happy to weigh in on that. It's one of those we'll cross the bridge when we get there kinds of things, but that's why when we put the loan out to bid, we wanted a non-penalty prepayment ability to do exactly what you're talking about. So when we get there, if that makes sense and we don't have a better use for that capital, we'll just pay it off and be done.
Matt, I have a question. You know, you laid out kind of three different scenarios of we have 20-year-old, nearly 20-year-old system right now that serves a very small portion of our community, maybe a large portion of our business community, but as far as the overall community, it doesn't really serve the community well. And so there's replace what we have because it's old and needs to be replaced. It is scrap everything and just leave it to one provider or go forward with a full build out. And I think, you know, and I'll have some comments on, but I guess my question is, I know you haven't been around for 20 years in the city doing these things. You've been around for a few more years than 20 years, but why have you heard, you have some history, you know, with Robin and people who've been around. Why hasn't the city organically grown this over the last 20 years to kind of pick off a neighborhood here and there and to try to, you know, slowly expand this when we do, you know, I know I call it the Polo Road neighborhood. I don't know what's actually called, but you know, when we do street projects there, when we've done other things, how come we haven't taken those opportunities over the years to do it? Can you speak a little bit to that?
I might actually lean on Michael a tiny bit for that one, if he's willing to pop back in and be part of the conversation here. Because I don't have a great answer for that. It's actually kind of confounded me a little bit since I've been here, but maybe Michael has some information on that one.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to your question.
Nice background.
Gotta represent. The original fiber design for the city was mainly designed to employ like wireless service and hit the cornerstone institutions. And that's something I think they were successful in. They, you know, the city operated wireless infrastructure for many years. At some point in the Bob Farmer days, the city council decided to not approve funding to refresh the equipment. As a result of that, the wireless service kind of dropped off. And our fiber design kind of has, you know, it's not really organically grown as you've described it, but we, you know, have churn and we bring on new customers all the time. So it is to some extent growing. The problem is the work involved due to the design of the fiber to bring on a new customer. You know, any new customer costs several $1,000s to bring on. It was never designed to really operate in an efficient way with what we're trying to do today. And that's the main, you know, that's primarily why this software, you know, is on one of the items is, you know, not only is the fiber designed in this project to make an install cost us a couple $100, the software is there to allow us to reduce, you know, all of this overhead expense to really, you know, turn this into like an efficient competitive business rather than something that is just kind of patched together and works pretty well, but is not really, you know, there.
Gotcha. So we are where we are today is essentially the answer. Okay.
unfortunately, that is kind of the answer.
Okay. Well, now we get the advantage of making a brand new, awesome decision on going forward with brand new parts and new fiber versus 10-year-old stuff. So that's a good decision to have to try to make. Any other questions for staff? Okay, I think, we have this and the next item is the resolution. So I think they kind of go hand in hand. So if there's anybody from the public who would like to comment on this, I see one more person has called in. Again, if you have called in and you want to comment, *9 is how you would raise your hand to get recognized. Otherwise, I would love to hear if anybody from the public would like to speak to this topic. Oh, nope, that is a panelist. Okay. All right. Is seeing no public comment, I will bring it back to council for a comment or a motion.
I have a motion.
Your hand wasn't up. Okay, Tony, go ahead.
Oh.
At this time, I would move that the city stop this broadband process and as alternative, look to pursue grants and money to a private organization or private company to find a company to pursue broadband with the city for the city and to stop this program within the city of Glenwood Springs as a government project. Thank you.
All right. Do I hear a second to that motion?
Motion fails for lack of a second. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for running our meeting, Tony. I appreciate that. Motion fails for lack of a second. Shelley.
I would like to make a motion that the city move forward with the 2-year build out based on the financing proposal that we are going to be discussing later on tonight. And I would just look for a second on that.
Second.
I'd like to make one further comment. I do feel like network and fiber optics and having broadband available to all of our customers and to our city is important infrastructure, even more so over the past few years and highlighted by this pandemic that we're in right now. Our new normal going forward is going to look a lot different possibly than what we were in a year ago or even a few months ago. And so the ability to have high-speed broadband available to our customers is important infrastructure for the city. And I think to have that spread and provided equitably to all of our city, all of the community, the residents and the businesses, it's important that it's part of our infrastructure. So I support this going forward.
All right. Thank you, Shelley. It's been moved by Shelley, seconded by myself. Further conversation, Rick, then Charlie, then Paula.
Why don't we bring Matt in first?
Well, fine, Matt. Go ahead.
Oh, all
I'll
right.
run your meeting.
I would just like to say this is a tremendous opportunity to not only help economically as we dig our way out of the COVID mess, but to really think down the road about the future of Glenwood Springs and what a jewel of a town this is. And it's not going to lose its luster as we come out of this, but it's really, I think, a big selling point for the future. There are studies that say that communities that do this, that have increased their fiber penetration, really have a big leg up economically in terms of developing future opportunities. The advantage here is that as a city-owned enterprise, we have a lot of experience serving people in Glenwood Springs. This is an extension of that, but it's also a stable extension. It's a reasonable fee for people to get 1 gigabyte of service, and that fee isn't going to go galloping up $2 or $3 or $4 every couple of months like my fee does with Comcast. I think we're going to get some pushback from some of the private companies who are in this business. But, you know, I really haven't seen much for them in the 3 years that I've been on the council in terms of pushing and making this happen. And so I'm going to vote fully in support of this and thank Matt and the whole electric department and Michael for all your hard work here. It's a really exciting thing to be doing. It's sort of a counterweight to everything else that's going on. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate that. Charlie, and then Paula.
Yeah, I'm also supporting this. And I have, my only hesitation is, and I wish I had a crystal ball to know that this is going to be the future of how we communicate, you know, the technology things and being the dinosaur on the council. I wouldn't don't go quite back to horse and buggy days, but I go back a ways when there were no computers and things like that. And so that's over 40, 50 years since I came out of high school. But I think this is a great economic development tool. The trend out of the 08-09 economic recession was more and more people went to work for themselves, and a lot of that was home type of employment. And this is the kind of thing that supports that, because it gives the people the speeds they need to do Zoom meetings with other people, to do with the research and do the things they need to do online. I'm one of the lucky people that has this right now. I was one of the test blocks, and it's just a phenomenal service for even my limited use of it between my office and my home when I work from home. So I fully support this and think, despite my reservations about will this be the tool of the future, it'll be long enough, I think we'll be able to recover our investment and hopefully be able to provide some good service to our citizens in the process.
Thanks, Charlie. Matt.
Come on, unmute. There we go.
I think you were unmuting as I was trying to unmute you as well. So I think we were like remuting each other.
And I apologize for cutting in front of council members at this point. But the one thing I wanted to point out was our conversation we had with the EDA yesterday, which was very encouraging. Trent brought up two things during that conversation. One, that broadband has been shown to be a very large economic driver. And we need that for this community. We need to expand what we do. Great that we're tourism based, that's spectacular. But if we can bring other economic drivers to this community and other high paying jobs to this community, that is a big benefit to us. And the funny thing that he mentioned yesterday that I kind of picked up on was that this is basically a grant through their public works. They are looking at broadband as a public works need. So it's not just, hey, we want to have internet because it's good for us, but they're looking at it as something that a city or a community should be able to provide to their residents, not just water, sewer, electric, those kinds of things. But this is a public works thing, which we've been talking about since day one. Is I find this to be a need for residents to have good, reliable, cost-effective internet just for homeschooling at this point. You know, it'd be spectacular if we had fiber to every home, that we could turn it on and make it a low cost thing for people who need that affordable return and that affordable internet connection. If we had it at their house right now, we could turn it on. We don't. So we're kind of stuck with what we have. But in the future, when things come up, it's something the city can make a decision on and say, we want to turn this on for everybody for 6 months, make it $10 and help the community out. So it is and I can't say enough, it is a vital thing. I feel, and I think the community feels, and the people we've been talking to feel, this is a public works thing that the city should be providing. That's my spiel. Sorry.
Thank you for that. Paula and then Tony.
That was inspirational, Matt. That was great. I feel a little bit like right now, like they must have felt in the 1800s when they decided the city of Glenwood would be one of the first to have electricity. We're a small population base, and I just want to bring that back on the competitors' note. Is those, from what my understanding is, large companies like Comcast and other providers of putting in this kind of updating that we're doing, they don't do it every year. They look at the population base and say, what is the return? And you may be 20 years down the line before your turn comes up. So I think us moving forward is an excellent move. I do think it's an economic opportunity. It's an it's an opportunity for all of us and for future people being in this area. And I think the other thing that I'm really excited about is the partnerships that Michael and Matt are doing and reaching out to other communities and helping them as well. And I think that puts us in the forefront. And as a result of that, I think that'll end up with additional grants coming our way because of working regionally like that. So thank you, Mike, and thanks, Matt.
All right. Tony.
It's clear from my motion, I really don't think that this is the proper role of government. This is a job for the private sector. I understand and I can count to 7, but to paraphrase President Reagan, government isn't always the solution to every problem. And Charlie makes a very good point that moving forward, I can't see the future. What I know is that the largest telecommunications company in this country and that provides 90% of the phone service and 90% of the internet service is probably not paying attention here, but we don't know what the technology is going to be like. This may be a great amenity. The city could do a lot of amenities. I just think we need to focus on other things. I know this is sort of part of streets, so I like that, but I can't support this. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? I have just a couple. I think that this is, I work from home. My job is reliant on consistent broadband access. So this is something that is an economic driver for my family. I have several friends, a number of friends actually, who work from home as well. I think we're a community that's always going to be difficult to attract manufacturing. It's going to be tough to diversify our economy beyond necessarily some of the things that we have just because of the high cost of living, but this is one of those things that can help do that. And so I'm supportive of this. I think that as we've seen some of the fickle nature of the federal administration with net neutrality and throttling broadband speeds depending on content, I think it's an opportunity for us to break away from the Comcast model and treat it actually as a public utility, which is a good for all of our citizens, and not as a profit driver that has to return a percentage to the investors and make next quarter's numbers. So for that reason, I think that this is a utility that we need to be involved in. So I'll be voting for it as well. Unless there's any other comments, Catherine, well, hold on. Actually, let me look at my agenda to see. This is an award of the broadband phase 1 build out. And I forget, I'm sorry. Do we have a motion by Charlie and a second by me? Never mind. Was it by Shelley?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, a motion by Shelley and a second by me. So Catherine, let's call the question.
Davis,
Yes.
Hershey,
No.
Stepp,
Yes.
Willman,
Yes.
Voorhees,
Yes.
Godus,
Yes.
Coe.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. Item number 11, probably we had a lot of conversation that dealt with item 11 and number 10, but is there significant things that we need to discuss with item 11, Matthew?
Do we want to go over item number 9, which kind of affects 10 and 11? Do you want to have Steve discuss that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just skipped right to the next. Yeah, I skipped over 9. I apologize. Yeah, let's do that, Steve. I apologize.
Okay, it needs number 9, the financing. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so this is pretty simple. We went out to bid. We got a couple of qualified bids back. This is $9 million, interest only for the first 3 years to keep our costs down, then level monthly payments after that over a total of 20 years, 2.25% They want about $45,000 to do their underwriting and underwrite the loan. It'll cost us 2% of the outstanding principal if we want to repay in the first 5 years. After that, we don't have any repayment penalty. And they, Alpine Bank, of course, wants to gather operating assets under management. So they want us to agree to put a little bit of money in their bank, which is not really terribly relevant to this project, but that's how it goes in financing. So it's a good cost of capital. The financing is very simple. It's flexible enough to do what we want. You guys are not really approving the financing tonight. You're just approving us to go through the underwriting process with Alpine Bank. I don't expect any problems with that, but right now we're in kind of an interesting, financial environment. So anything could happen, but I don't expect any problems. And I think in about 5 weeks or so, we can probably get through that, and then we'll be able to bring a final package to you guys for approval.
Charlie.
Steve, I know you talked about a couple of things this afternoon, and I'm concerned about giving them $600,000 and no interest, because effectively that increases the actual annual percentage rate in the way you would do a mortgage. Be that as it may, the other question I had is what I heard from Deborah and Matt earlier is the possibility of getting grant money. When does a prepayment penalty, is it after 5 years?
5 years, right.
If we get grant money, we would need all 9 million. Do we basically invest that money and then, how does that work if we get grant money as far as can we prepay this, or can we try to write a condition in there where if we get grant money that we can reduce the amount we borrow?
Sure. Yeah, so we'll take $9 million and then we'll use it as needed. If we get grant money, that'll kind of add to that $9 million. As soon as we get to the point where we think that we don't have a good use for that capital anymore, we'll just prepay it. But we'll be paying 2.25% interest. We'll be earning, something like 1 or 1.25% interest. Who really knows? But the overall cost of that capital isn't too bad for us. With respect to the $600,000, you're right. I'm not super crazy about that either, and we'll see if we can negotiate out during the underwriting process. But 2.25%. Our cost, if we had that $600,000 in the bank, we'd earn a little bit of interest on it, but really all we're foregoing is the interest we would have earned on that money. So it's not unreasonable on their part, but you are absolutely right. It adds to the cost of the financing, no question.
So something you just said just triggered something. I should have thought of this earlier, but we're going to borrow the 9 million, we're going to put it in the bank, we'll earn interest on it. So the actual net effective interest rate will come down because we're earning money on the 9 million until we spend it.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions? All right, we'll turn it over to the sorry.
Oh, never mind.
Okay, I'll turn it back to the public for public comment on broadband financing. Again, anybody who is called in, *9 is the number. Otherwise, you can raise your hand and make any comments you want, really about broadband at all. All right, quiet bunch tonight. I'll bring it back to City Council for comments and/or a motion. Councilor Woolman.
I would move that we authorize staff to proceed to obtain the financing and generally the terms and conditions set forth in the agenda packet.
Is that with Alpine Bank as
yes.
Post? I'll second the motion.
Been moved by Charlie, seconded by Shelley. Further conversation, Rick, then Paula. You're muted, Rick.
Yeah, I would just like to thank Alpine Bank for partnering with us in this endeavor. I know the upfront cost may be something that we can negotiate down, but looks like reasonable terms to me, interest-wise, and after 2 years, no prepayment penalty. I think that's a little unusual, and so I'm going to be voting for the motion. Thank you.
Paula. Unmute.
You just leave that on. More of a question, and I should have asked it earlier, but Steve, this is this financing and everything is all under the electric department's our payback and all of that, right? Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, sort of. The broadband is going to be a utility that stands on its own, just like water, wastewater, and our electric fund. We'll probably spin it out into its own fund, so it's its own thing. And the idea is that broadband will pay for itself. We need the electric fund because we have to have something to secure the debt with, that $9 million. So we're putting the revenue of the electric fund up to secure that. But the broadband project itself the intention is not to cannibalize our electric fund financially at all. They're just kind of backing the loan.
Okay, thanks for that clarity. Thank
You
you.
know, if I can jump in for a second, it's probably important for me to clarify too that normally when we talk about debt, we would have seen an election because we're talking about debt in out of the general city funds. Enterprise funds are not subject to Tabor. That's why Steve keeps talking about how it's going to pay for itself and it's got to run itself without the benefit of taxpayer money. That's kind of the point. That's part of this, why it's structured the way it is and why we can issue debt backed by the electric fund as a standalone enterprise.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Sorry, hold on one sec, guys. All right, we have a motion by Charlie, second by Shelley.
Motion on this?
I believe we did have a motion by Shelley, or did I get it mixed up?
I realize that, but just from what Steve said earlier, that he's just looking for approval. Is that what we're basically saying, to continue negotiating? Is that the motion? Sorry.
Motion was authorized staff to move forward with the financing.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was trying to remember. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an award. Catherine, can you call the question?
Davis,
Yes.
Hershey,
No.
Godus,
Yes.
Voorhees,
Hey, Rick.
Oh, hard.
Sorry. Yes. YES.
Got to keep Rick away.
Deb,
Yes.
Pope,
Yes.
Willman,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right, now we'll get back into order. I'm sorry, I skipped that one. Resolution or item number 11, resolution 2018, resolution of City Council of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, authorizing the sole source procurement of the broadband operations support system software for last mile FTTP implementation. Is there further information we need to know on this, or have we kind of covered in the first two items, Matthew? I don't want to call you Matthew, it's Matt. It's just your name is Matthew on the thing, so I keep saying Matthew. Apologize.
Legally speaking, it's Matthew. I don't really care. You can call me whatever you want to. So we need an operating software. The one we currently have is outdated. It doesn't have the capabilities of a newer software, which, we can drag Michael into this conversation also, but
I think that's the next item. Is that? Am I on the wrong item? I think we're looking at the Lightworks
No.
contract. No, sorry.
He's skipping around. I was just going.
Where am I at here? We're on item number 11, which I have on my agenda as.
You skipped 10.
You did.
Skip 10, yeah.
Jeez.
Can't skip 10.
10.
I was just rolling with it.
You know, we should have these earlier in the day. I agree with Rick.
So going back to the construction RFP, we went out.
There we go.
We went for a bid for the construction of phase 1 for the broadband expansion. The city itself will be buying all the materials for phase 1. All we were asking for from contractors is the labor to actually install those materials and create phase 1 for us. There were 3 responses. We had 7 people that actually pre-qualified. 3 came back with responses. The highest score was for Lightworks. And that came back for many reasons. 1 was the pricing. 2 was their capabilities. They're a very qualified contractor. All 3 of them were actually. It was really nice to see the quality of contractor that came in. We had budgeted in the pro forma about $550,000 for just the labor for the installation for phase one. Lightworks came back at $485,000, well within the budget for phase one. And that's why we would potentially have further conversations with them, because now we do have linear foot prices for borings and hanging wire and pulling wire and all these other fun things. We would go out to them once we award this contract. We'd probably start the conversation almost immediately of, hey, how much would it cost and where would we go and what are the timeframes to move forward within a 2-year phased implementation instead of a 5. But to get through this process, we are suggesting as staff to award the broadband fiber to home construction based on bid 2020-07 to Lightworks Fiber and Consulting for the a dollar amount shown.
Questions, Shelley?
I was actually ready to make a motion, but just because we did discuss this earlier, but I can wait to see if other members have questions. Or I can make a motion.
You know, I feel like if it's okay with everybody else, I see at least Rick nodding that we've really kind of determined where we're going with broadband tonight. Possibly, I will open it one more time up to public comment to just give the public a chance. So Shelley, if you will hold that motion real quick. Any public comment from anybody? Going once, going twice? Shelley, I would love to hear that motion.
Okay, I will move that the city award phase one of the broadband fiber to the home construction from RFP bid 2020-007 to Lightworks Fiber and Consulting for the amount of $185,836.68.
Been moved by Shelley. I heard a second, I believe, from Rick.
Yes.
Steve.
Steve, okay.
That's
Okay.
good.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, Catherine, let's call the question.
Coe,
Yes.
Step,
Yes.
Willman,
Yes.
Godus,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Hershey,
No.
Voorhees.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. I think our community is going to be doing broadband, guys. That's kind of a 20-year plan that's finally coalesced. So congratulations.
You got one more to go.
Yeah, you have 11, Mayor.
11 now.
Are we not done with broadband yet? Okay, number 11.
I nominate Shelley to run this meeting.
Seconded.
No, thanks. Well, the mayor gets paid the big bucks to run the meeting.
Not anymore, apparently. No. All right, item 11. This is a sole source procurement of broadband operation support.
All right, hold on. I'm pulling something up on my screen real quick here. So the city currently has a operating software for our fiber optics billings and just keeping track of who we have service to and what that service is. Moving forward, that is very old and limited software. So moving forward, this is kind of like taking finance from where they were into the new ERP, with Munis, which hopefully it's not as painful. But the thought was that we would go out for a new software. GLDS was one that we started looking at. Uptown had suggested that we look at what their software capabilities are. They've dealt with a lot of these companies. They've seen pricing for a lot of these companies. They've seen capabilities of a lot of these companies. So that's why this is being suggested as a sole source. You probably read the letter from Uptown. They believe that we can go out for an RFP we want to, that's fine. But most likely at the end of the day, we're going to end up with GLDS as our preferred vendor anyhow, due to cost savings and capabilities of the program and the ability of that program to mesh with the equipment that we currently have and are moving towards with our broadband expansion. If you would like to know exactly what and why we suggest this software, Michael can hop in and he can tell you all the fun details of how it can be a portal for residents to come in and change their service, pay for their service online, send messages. It's kind of like what Comcast does. I mean, the Comcast has a robust system, wanted to use it one time, system where you can go online and do a lot of things for your service yourself, and not have to call that service person at the other end of the phone. So this would be moving our OSS software we currently have into the 2020 timeframe and making our ability to provide for our customers even better customer service wise than what we have now.
All right. Questions? Shelley and Paula.
I just had a quick question, Matt, as far as, will this system integrate with our new ERP system, or does it need to? Or I'm just thinking of a scenario where someone wants to consolidate all of their utility billings or something along those lines.
So Michael can chime in on this one. We did have this conversation with Steve and Yvette. There's still two different bills. So broadband's its own department, electric's its own department, water's its own department. But we didn't see the need for the two to integrate. There's probably a way to do it, but there's always a financial and a process repercussion for trying to do those kinds of things. And Munis doesn't have the ability to do what we want it to do for fiber optic service. This is a very specialized piece of software associated with it. I don't know if Steve or Michael wants to hop in and expand upon that answer.
I mean, I can weigh in if you want. I mean, Shelley, that's a really good question. We've thought a lot about that. I'd love to have one system and one, place of entry, and you're just kind of done with it. But, Matt's right. The ERP is not built for broadband billing. It's just too different. And, people are going to want to manage their accounts and have a lot of, direct control over what they do. We will do what we can to build it so that somebody's got either a single sign-in, or we make it as easy as they can if they want to manage their electric and water and, landfill bills and broadband bills, so we can get it all kind of up in the same place. But I think we're going the right direction to have those sit next to each other and not try to integrate them. That's going to complicate things unnecessarily. And if this implementation is anywhere near as hard as Munis, I would pray that you guys all vote no. No, it won't be. This will be way easier. And, Dave Stockton and Neil, I've spent a lot of time working with those guys. They know what they're doing. I really trust their counsel a lot. And I know that Michael has spent lots and lots of time with this software. We're doing the right thing here.
Okay, thanks.
Paula.
Shelley asked my first question, but just real quickly, and keeping in mind that I looked at this and I haven't looked at it for months like you have, Matt, but why in this contract are we having to pay for training for a system we're buying, which is part of the cost in that contract? And then there are a few things on the back that I wasn't quite sure of. I mentioned earlier that this was limited to 2,500 users. And then I go back to the back, one of the end pages, and it talks about $1 for a new subscriber, per new subscriber, 0.0275 cents per messaging. I mean, what are all those kind of incremental costs in there, and how does that work out to monthly billing, and what's that going to cost the city, I guess is what I'm looking at. So training, number one, and what are all those other incremental costs?
So the training one's an easy answer. It's just like ViewWorks. It's just like the ERP. We're paying for people to help us implement it and learn the software. So they can give us the software. There's a lot of nuances. It can do 1,000 different things. What do we want it to do? What do we want to learn in the software? So ERP, we've had Plant Moran out here. Munis has been out here. Tyler Technologies has been out here. They're teaching us how to implement the software. ViewWorks, the new asset management software we're using, they're online and they're teaching us how to use the software. So there's always a training associated with the software. And yes, we have to pay for that. That's why it's a line item, so we can see what it is. It's not just a one lump sum proposal. Here, you get all this stuff. We get to kind of see how everything is broken out within the proposal. So software training is always in there. Going to the back page, you are 100% correct. There are a lot of little nuances built into the back page. So yes, we get 2,500 subscribers for this one rate. If we want to add 2,500 subscribers, there will be a new rate associated with our yearly payout on this particular piece of software. And it's basically based off of what you were just saying right there. So, you know, $1 per subscriber, they're paying us $70 a month. $1 of that per year goes to us having them added to the software in itself. So there are little fees associated with everything in the world. And you are correct. You got to read fine print in the back to understand what all those little fees are. But all of those little fees are already accounted for within our pro forma. This is just the beginning phases of that.
Okay,
So
great.
they've been accounted for within the price, and I guess is the end game.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right, see none, I'll open up to the public one last time. See none, I'll bring it back to council for a motion.
I would like to make a motion.
Please, Rick.
We approve the sole source award to Great Lakes Data System for broadband OSS system for a budget amount of $145,340.
A second.
Been moved by Rick, seconded by Paula. Further discussion? All right, all those opposed, say aye.
What?
All those opposed, say aye. I'm gonna make it easy on you.
Why are you singling me out, Mr. Mayor? It's not appropriate. I would like a roll call vote done through the clerk like it's always done.
Catherine, could you
Thank
please take a roll call?
Voorhees,
Yes.
Willman,
Yes.
Step. Hershey,
No.
Davis,
Yes.
Hope,
Yes.
Godus,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay.
We're doing broadband.
I think that's
Yeah.
all broadband.
So you go broke.
Yay.
Yay.
Okay, next item, I believe, is item number 12. Is this correct? Okay, thank you. This is consideration of an appeal of planning and zoning commission denial of a special use permit for personal care boarding home. It's provided in municipal code section 070.030.030C4. The appeal was filed November 6, 2019. And we are doing the presentation this evening. We're asking questions. We're not taking public comment.
No, you are taking, you can take public comment if there is
Okay.
any this evening, but we are leaving that open until the next regularly scheduled council meeting.
Okay,
So you are not doing any council comments or taking a position
after.
on the application tonight.
It'll be the longest public comment ever. Perfect.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Gretchen.
Can I ask just a procedural question? Carl, I noticed in looking at the packet, there's a bunch of pro and con statements. Are we considering those as part of the public comment?
Those are actually, let's see. Yes. Let me pull them up here. Yeah.
There are a couple of places, but some particular comments the correspondence received the last attachment to this agenda item.
Right. No, those are considered public comment. And I think what we'll probably do is not tonight, but at the next meeting, we'll go ahead and read those into the record.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, Council, good evening. If you don't mind, just bear with me for a moment. I am going to share a screen with you. I've got about 4 or 5 real quick slides to show you, which summarizes my staff report. Okay. Oop. Okay, are you all seeing my screen?
Mhm.
Okay, great. So just real quickly, personal care boarding homes are basically assisted living residences that provide room and board to between 3 and 6 people who, because of an impaired ability, they elect protective oversight, personal services, and social care. In Glenwood Springs, personal care boarding homes require a special use permit, which is a review and decision by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So on November 26th of last year, the Planning and Zoning Commission heard and reviewed the special use permit request for a personal care boarding home at 1713 Grand Avenue. The commission, it considered performance standards and criteria that are applicable to all special use permits, as well as specific use criteria that are applicable just to personal care boarding homes. In a 4-1 vote, the P&Z decided denied the application based on the finding that the use was incompatible with the surrounding neighborhood. And they also expressed concerns about Grand Avenue traffic, trash collection, and administration of the facility. The applicant then filed an official appeal later that same evening. So when council considers appeals, staff does not make a formal recommendation. You would have noted that in my staff report. The burden actually is on the applicant to present the facts that warrant the appeal. The council considers appeals based on 4 criteria that are up on your screen. The facts as stated in the application and as presented by the applicant, the requirements of and the intent of the code standards compared to the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision. You consider evidence related to how the applicable standards from the code have been administered or interpreted in the past. And then you also consider consistency with the comprehensive plan. So at the next regular meeting, which would be May 7th, your decision options will be to affirm the Planning and Zoning Commission's denial or to reverse their decision, thereby approving the application. If you decide to reverse the decision, then you can attach conditions of approval to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the city. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and I will stop sharing my screen. There we go. And take any questions that you might have, or then turn the presentation over to the applicant.
Any questions for staff?
One quick question, Gretchen.
Yes.
I know you're not making a recommendation on the appeal, but I see from the packet, the original recommendation to P&Z was that the project did meet the code and that it was recommended for approval. Is that correct?
That was my finding, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we'll turn the presentation over to the applicant.
Okay, Jonathan, I just got a message from Alyssa who was asking who the applicant is. If hopefully she can hear this. The applicant is either Yesenia Gonzalez Hernandez or Sumner Schachter.
I am promoting them both to panelists right now, and they will be in the meeting able to present.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Looks like Yesenia is able to present and unmuted. Yesenia.
Hi.
Hello.
Do you hear me? Hi.
Doing great, yes.
Yeah, we're fine. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Yesenia Gonzalez. I am a professional healthcare provider. I am certified nurse assistant with more than 25 years of experience. I saw a big necessity for care of the elderly because I love what I do with a passion, I am here to present my project. My goal is to convert my existing residence at 1713 Grand Avenue to a personal care boarding home, assisted living group home. The resident will only need personal care support with their daily living activities and require no medication support others than assisting with medications. The personal care will include meal preparation, laundry, cleaning, assisting with the transferring, showering, and dressing, medical transportation, and providing social interactions. This project is a personal and professional goal of mine, which also meets the needs of our community and our comprehensive plan. I will now ask Sumner Stachter to present the appeal. Okay.
John, you may need to let Sumner know he needs to.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sumner, you need to unmute. There you go.
All right, you did it. All right, thank you. Hey, first of all, I'd like to thank the council, city manager, and staff with what's going on in this pandemic for all your hard work and decisions and the things you're doing on behalf of all of us. Thank you. I'm a longtime friend of Jacinia and her family. By necessity, I recused myself from the planning and zoning meeting that in 6 as I had helped Jacinia with their special use permit request. I have seen the minutes of the meeting, of the P&Z meeting, and I have listened to the audio of the meeting. We believe that the decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission denying the SUP for a personal care boarding home at 1713 Grand was an error and should be reversed for several reasons. The use, personal care boarding home, is by code definition and city precedent a residential use, and I think you have references to the code as well as the state statutes defining it as a residence in your packet. It is an allowed use by SUP in our code and in the residential area requested. It is not an institutional use as referenced by planning and zoning, nor incompatible with the surrounding uses, areas, and residences as noted by the P&Z. So number one, the proposed use, as I said, is determined by staff, and the staff report is, quote, is not expected to have any impact to surrounding properties over and above that of a single family home, end quote. Also, as noted by staff and the applicant, the proposed use meets several goals of the city's comprehensive plan, including maintaining and enhancing social sustainability, providing housing opportunities for the entire community, preserving small town character, supporting social diversity, and in your recent strategic vision and action plan, one of your top priorities was to create diverse and inclusionary housing. All of this at no cost to the city. We would suggest that the proposed use might even have less impact than the current use, where there are currently 5 family members, vehicles going daily to school, work, general travel, as well as pets. There's no credible evidence of decline in property value to the surrounding area. Indeed, another subdivision, Park West, with a personal care boarding home has had increases in assessed value, as has most of Glenwood Springs. As per staff report and your specific criteria, the request for the SUP does meet the 7 general performance standards in our code, 7 personal care boarding home special use criteria. These were not factors addressed specifically in the P&Z denial. We believe that the other review criteria were also met by the applicant and not adequately considered by P&Z. Specifically, number 1, the use will be compatible with the surrounding area. Again, it is a legal residential use. The impacts of the use on the surrounding areas have been adequately minimized. Number 1, there will be no external changes to the residence. It'll look like the house it is. Second, planning and zoning did express concern about trash pickup, as Gretchen mentioned. I think trash pickup for this residence will remain the same as current and is the same for all the other residences along that portion of Grant. It has been done safely and in the same way for years. there will be no change. Thirdly, some of the public objection as well as concern of a commissioner, planning and zoning commissioner, who is a resident of the subdivision, but was not noticed and does not live on Grand Avenue, had to do with the quote, quality and character of the neighborhood. There was an admission in that meeting by that commissioner and other people in the public that quality was already deteriorating with rental properties, short-term vacation rentals, and home office business in the neighborhood, including the home office business of the planning and zoning commissioner. In addition, this applicant and the residents isn't even in the internal portion of that neighborhood, as you know from the maps in the area. Grand Avenue, even though part of the subdivision, is considerably separated from that old Polo subdivision. There would be no traffic impact, no visual impact to most of the neighborhood for this residential use. The use will comply with all applicable standards of the code. The use is in conformance with the comp plan and other city plans and policies. The use minimize adverse impacts to the health, safety, and welfare of the inhabitants of the surrounding area in the city. The major concern, besides the somewhat subjective suitability decision by P&Z, was expressed about Grand Avenue and egress and entry to the property. That was one of the stated bases for denial. I apologize for not being able to react to that at the meeting. The parking, as noted in your materials, so there's some very clear pictures, has been addressed. This site has an existing pad that actually allows up to 4 vehicles, and it has been doing so since November, to park north-south, meaning they can enter and egress this property without ever backing onto Grand Avenue. This is one of the few residences that can do this easily along this area. Others along Grand, including adjacent neighbors, which you can see pictures of also, are entering and exiting, often backing in or out of Grand Avenue. Next, the applicant's qualifications, management, ability, and operation. A great deal of the questions of the applicant and discussion during the planning and zoning meeting involve qualification, management of the residents, operations, as well as some internal questions about the floor plan of the house. A review of the audio indicated that over 40 minutes of questioning by the commissioner living on Park Avenue. A lot of the emphasis, and I admit there's a lot of latitude in an SUP review, but a lot of the questioning was perhaps somewhat biased and out of the norm for normal reviews and criteria for this application. In addition to the management ability of the applicant, finances and marital status were also queried. Past planning and zoning review of marijuana dispensaries, downtown banks, and energy supply company this year did not query the ability of management, the management mechanisms, bookkeeping, or even their experience. These are usually not part of a review or criteria for compatible use. We don't think they should have been in this case. The applicant's qualification experience are established and verified and have been presented to you as well as they were to planning and zoning. The applicant also has experience owning and operating her own small business. The oversight of licensure and approval and ongoing monitoring for a personal care boarding home is heavily regulated by the state of Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. There are about 70 pages of regulations and conditions the applicant and the residence itself must meet for final approval, ongoing operation, and safety of residents and the community. Upon your approval, the applicant will also be accountable to the planning department for meeting conditions and showing state approval. The applicant will also be accountable to the building department for inspections and approvals and safety requirements. So your approval, understanding this, your approval is still conditional upon licensure by the State Department of Health. Ironically, and that's the cart and horse, one of the requirements of the state for application for a personal care boarding home is that the residents be in an approved zone. So the need for this SUP approval before even going to the expense, significant state required course and testing and licensure requirements is needed. Again, it's still going to be, should you overturn this decision, it's still conditional on her meeting all the other conditions of the state as well as building department and planning department. And lastly, there is an existing precedent for this approval within the city. As noted in your material, Harmony House at 1045 Park West Drive is a personal care residential home deeply embedded into the Park West subdivision. It has been in operation since about 2007. Same goals and services as proposed by the applicant, former mayor, and again, more deeply embedded in the subdivision in terms of traffic and location than the proposed location on 1713 Grand. According to our planning staff, there have been no objections or complaints to this residence. Glenwood then has a precedent for approving the personal care boarding home. Approval for this application should consider that precedent without bias. So in summary, we feel that the appeal should be granted, that the planning and zoning denial was made with errors and also with consideration of somewhat narrow and in some cases criteria that should not have been factors. This application meets the general performance standards and specific personal care boarding home criteria in our code, and the application and applicant also meet your review criteria as outlined by Gretchen tonight. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sumner. Thank you,
You're welcome.
Ksenia. Questions from council for either of the presenters? Charlie.
Yeah, Sumner or Ksenia, who wants to answer this, but the planning and zoning said it was incompatible with the neighborhood. I heard you talk a little bit about that, but more in the stance of the criteria. Why do you feel it's compatible, I guess would be my question. What's your position on why it's compatible, why that portion, from a factual standpoint, not quoting me the quote?
From a factual standpoint, Charlie, number one, it is going to remain a residence. There's no physical differences to the building whatsoever. So it's going to be the same house that it currently is on Grad Avenue, albeit this is not factual, it's somewhat hypothetical, but theoretically less traffic because there will be fewer drivers in and out of this residence. So from an appearance point of view, it's still a residence. From a traffic and safety point of view, we feel it is compatible with the neighborhood. There'll be no visible changes whatsoever. And noise is not a factor, trash is not a factor either.
Any other questions? Sumner, I have a question.
Sure.
Who was the commissioner that asked about marital status and bookkeeping experience?
I'd have to go back. I believe most of it in that 40 minutes was Commissioner Malloy. I'd have to go back and listen exactly.
And your experience in working with Planning and Zoning Commission, why would somebody, why would it be pertinent what the marital status or bookkeeping experience of an applicant would be?
I don't want to speculate, Mayor. I'm just not sure how objective the questioning was in this case after listening to the meeting.
Okay. Thank you for that measured response. Paula. Paula, muted. You're muted. Sorry.
Got it. Yeah. Got to remind myself. Thank you for presenting this, Sumner and Ksenia. Two quick questions, I think. What other community service kind of things would be happening with this location? Like, would you be using Traveler, or would the clients be using Traveler? Are there other things like that that are kind of part of home health care?
Traveler would be one use as needed. And then also there's a possibility that Ksenia staff would be transporting as needed to various services. Those would be the two most likely. The residents will not have their own vehicles.
Okay. And I noticed a bit about the fire suppression. How long, I assume all of the fire suppression and stuff would have to be put in place before even this started. How long of a time frame is that? Do you have a speculation on what it would take to put that in that she needs for fire suppression?
I'm not sure. I'm Jacinia might have an answer. I mean, there's 2 steps, Paula. One will be going through the extensive, I assume there's approval. There's several steps Jacinia has to go through. One will be the state certification. In and itself, there's a big financial fee to apply, plus the coursework, plus her own qualifications. Then, or if she chooses concurrently with that, based on what the city requires in terms of building code, the fire suppression system will go in. There's already a bid on there. I think you saw that. We got that bid plus some other modifications, perhaps internally the house. So it could be, you know, given what's going on in the economy, it could be 6-12 months. I would say probably 6 to 18 months would be a reasonable time frame for this to come to fruition.
Okay. And staff would have to be trained on how to use that internal system, because I would assume that would take some training.
Well, the fire suppression system should be like, once it's in, once the tank and the it's even beyond my techno, once all the pressure is there and the tank is in and the outlets are installed, it'll be like any other system. It's going to be basically automatic, just like we have in any other, like we've required in some new residences in town, as well as commercial space.
Okay, thanks.
Little staff operation of that at all. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. Councilor Davis.
A couple of questions that are probably in my packet, but I missed it, and I'm just curious. How many clients would you expect to service at one time at this location? And is it just day clients, or are they actually residing? Is it an overnight service?
2 answers. The license by state definition and what Jacinia is applying for is between 3 and 6. It could be less than 3. But less than 3, you don't need a license. It'll be between a licensure for 3 to 6 residences. How many will actually be there at any one time will depend on a couple factors. One, the market, and second, her final build out, whether she chooses to have room for all 6. Right now, I think you could probably technically have 4 to 6 if you doubled up rooms, which is allowed. So it'll be 3 to 6. No more than 6, depending on the market. And it is a 24-hour facility. They will be living there, and there will be 3 shifts of qualified caregivers at the residence. So somebody will be there all the time.
Anything further? Any other questions? Anything else from the applicant? All right. All right. I've had a request sent to me that we've been here for a couple hours, 2.5 hours, that we take a brief break so we can get hydrated and unhydrated. So before I turn it over to the public for public comment, does anybody have go ahead, Carl?
I just wanted to confirm, I know Tony's been having some broadband issues and he had to turn off his video. And I'd just like for the record to reflect that while Sumner was talking, that Councilor Hershey was able to hear everything that was going on. He just had his camera turned off so that he would use
I can hear it. It's just, if I shut off the camera, I get more, it doesn't break up.
Right.
So
No,
sorry.
that's
The
all I was
world
trying to
we live in.
confirm was,
Carl, I don't control Zoom. I don't control the internet. So
what I'm trying to do,
my best.
What I'm trying to do is make sure that there is a record that you listened to everything for purposes
If
of
you
the
want, I
record.
won't vote next time. I really don't care.
Tony, if you had city broadband like I do, then you wouldn't have any problems with
I
just had to put that out there.
yeah, you're hilarious. If I had an extra $2,500, Shelley, maybe I could afford it.
So actually, really, all I was trying to do is make sure that it was clear for the record that Tony was participating. That was it.
I could hear every
certified.
single thing that Sumner and Yesenia said, every word. I don't know there's a requirement that you see me every second.
All right. It sounds like we have a verification for the record. It's 8:09. We will re-adjourn at 8:13.
Thank you.
Everything happened right at the right time. Everything was ready and done.
Jonathan. Mr. Godis, you're muted. You're muted.
Thank you. Usually it's you that's muted and me that's not.
Yeah, well, so I just wanted to make a record for Mr. Hanlon's benefit that if I shut off the video, and I know this is so ironic, it helps with my internet. I think my neighbors all start using their Comcast around 8 or 9 o'clock for some reason. So it does limit my width. So, but I listen to every word. I don't know that there's a requirement that you see me, but I'm certainly participating, and I haven't left my computer for a second.
I think,
except to go to the bathroom.
I think being a quasi judicial, I think everybody is just very concerned because this is such a new way to do a quasi judicial hearing, and so I think everybody.
I guess I could leave my video on and not listen. Would that help?
I think the record that you just made is great, Tony. That's all I was looking for.
I appreciate it. It just helps with the width, and maybe it'll be better now. But sometimes you guys freeze up.
Thank you.
And I didn't create COVID-19 or this unfortunate situation. I wish we were all together and Sumner was in the room with us and we could talk to him and listen. That would be perfect, but we can't.
All right. Well, thank you for the break. I appreciate that. We are back now. We have heard from the applicant and Sumner, who's not the applicant, but speaking on behalf of the applicant, I guess. And so I will now ask we're going to go to public comment, not bring it back for any comments. We're going to table the rest after this public comment. I'm looking for a head nod from Carl. There we go. So does anybody from the public wish to speak in relation to this proposal? *9 if you're on the phone. Okay. Seeing no one who wants to speak on behalf of the proposal, I think this item is done for us this evening. We will go now to, well, I'm getting my agenda that I'm sure I'm going to screw up again.
And I would just say again, for the public's benefit, there were written comments that were provided that will be read into the record at the next regular meeting when we complete this hearing, as well as if the public wants to make comments between now and then, they can email those either to the planning department or the city clerk.
Carl, should we make a motion to continue the public hearing until the May 7th meeting?
It probably wouldn't hurt. We noticed it that way, but it probably wouldn't hurt to also have the motion, Charlie, if you don't mind.
No, I'll make a motion. We continue the public hearing on planning item 10-20 appeal from tonight's date until the next regular scheduled council meeting, which I believe is May 7th, 2020.
I second the motion.
Been moved by Charlie, seconded by Shelley. Catherine, will you take roll call?
Godis,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Willman,
Yes.
Voorhees,
Yes.
Hershey,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Depp.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Next item, thanks for that, Charlie, is item number 13, series of 2020, an ordinance of City Council of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, amending standards in the Glenwood Springs Municipal Code related to accessory dwelling units. First reading.
Evening, Mayor and Council. This is Hannah Klausman reporting for Community Development on this item. Ordinance number 8 of 2020. This is consideration of a text amendment to Municipal Code Section 70 to amend accessory dwelling unit development standards. A little bit of background. We held several work sessions with Planning and Zoning Commission, our Housing Commission, and also one where City Council was present discussing affordable housing aspects, and that's where this topic came from. P&Z directed staff with some recommendations that came from those work sessions. Staff then took that recommendation back and came back with some proposed language. Planning and zoning reviewed that proposal at their February 25th meeting and recommended approval of the staff proposal with one additional change that they made during that meeting. So this can be quite lengthy. So I think the best way to do this, I'm going to make a rundown of the changes that are being made to our accessory dwelling unit standards. Yes, Mayor.
Thanks. I appreciate that. You know, and it occurs to me that, you know, not to make it more lengthy, but that some of us on council have heard and have had conversations with ADUs, and some of us maybe aren't as familiar with the intent, the purpose, and maybe the history. I don't need the 10-minute like long history, but maybe the 3-minute of what is their intent and what are they trying to accomplish in the community.
Sure, I can address that. And this is briefly touched on in your staff report as well. So we've had accessory dwelling units on the books for City of Glenwood Springs since 1998. Their intent, as identified in our code, is to provide a varied housing stock and more affordable housing options. That's the very shortened elevator speech. And accessory dwelling unit standards have gone through changes multiple times over the years since that time, tweaking and changing things along the way. This proposal now that sits before you has really come about with an effort to encourage, again, more housing options, smaller housing options that naturally lead to affordable options, and picking that topic back up again and really trying to encourage an increase in ADU development and make it possibly easier for applicants to make it through that process with our community development department. Does that answer that question?
That's great background. Thank you.
Great. So I'm going to go through the proposed changes. I did include a PowerPoint presentation in your packet and am happy to go through that with more detail if there are questions, as well as some images in the planning and zoning staff report that is attached also that kind of explains some of those concepts that might be hard to visualize without an actual picture. So we have 11 main changes that are going on. And so the first one, we're removing ADUs from the maximum size allowance calculation for accessory structures on a lot. So currently we have a combined maximum of 1,000 square feet for all accessory structures on a lot. We are removing ADU, accessory dwelling unit, from that calculation. So garages will still be held and other accessory structures will still be held to that 1,000 square feet. And ADU will not be part of that calculation as proposed. We've also taken time to clarify and define what required rear yard is. And I do have some images in your packet that allows you to understand that a little bit better because staff also needed some clarification on that as well as it was written in code. One of the big changes we're doing also is increasing the maximum size that an ADU can be. That's proposed to go from 850 square feet, which is the current regulation, up to 1,000 square feet. So allowing ADUs to come in larger. In that same vein, the proposal is to increase the percentage of a primary dwelling size that an ADU can be. Currently, that is set at 49%. So an ADU can only be as large as 49% of the primary dwelling. The proposal tonight is to increase that to 55% of the primary dwelling. So those two changes, increasing the size and increasing the percentage of the primary dwelling, allow ADUs to be larger and also take up a larger percentage of the primary dwelling area. One of the new changes, we've added a unit size exception. And this is really getting at ADU conversions that are happening within an existing building footprint. So I did mention the term primary dwelling and percentage of primary dwelling. It's currently at just under half. And so that has been very limiting for people converting basements or attics or other areas within their home. Community development sees a lot of variances come out of this particular aspect where someone has a basement that is larger than 49% of their primary dwelling, which means they're not able to come in and have that without a variance from code. So this unit size exception gets around that aspect and has specific conditions attached to it that is literally, it's not increasing the building footprint size, it's happening entirely within the dwelling. So as proposed tonight, a unit size exception does allow for those to go larger than even the 55%. We've also added a front yard exception town and in other areas. My internet connection is unstable, it says. Right there with you, Tony. This would allow an accessory dwelling unit to be placed in the front yard, which we currently don't allow. Our code actually prohibits it from occurring in anything but the side or rear. So this is an exception to that. We're also increasing the required rear yard maximum coverage allowance. There's a great picture that I did in your packet that tells you what the required rear yard is and what that coverage looks like. So we're allowing more of it to be covered, which is in line with the next change, which is basically reducing the rear yard setback requirement. So it would go to what's being proposed is 5 feet, which is a reduction from what it currently is. We also have language for preserving of existing structures allowance. And this is getting at applicants that come in who have, let's say, a garage that's existing on their property. That garage does not meet existing structures allowance, would allow that applicant to come in and propose an ADU in that structure that's not increasing the footprint and not have to go through the variance procedure. So really allowing something that already exists to change in intensity to be an ADU. And then we have some items that are cleaning up some of code language. We had some conflicting language with our residential building design standards. So we are removing language that refers to an ADU lot coverage bonus from that section, which is 70, 40, 80. And finally, the change that Planning and Zoning Commission wanted added in, because we are removing ADUs from the residential building design standards, there was one aspect in that section that Planning and Zoning wanted to maintain for an ADU, which is the four-sided design standard. And the four-sided design is basically saying you shall have so many architectural features on each side of your building. It's to make it aesthetically pleasing and break up large walls. So P&Z put forth that ADUs shall meet the four-sided design with a minimum of 2 architectural features that is also included in the language and listed in section 70, 40, 80. So that's a lot to throw at you, and I figured I'd get the changes out there and see what questions we have and then go from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. I wish you had the advantage of city broadband.
I used to. It was great.
Councilor Willman and then Paula.
Hannah, I read 2 sections and I'm not quite sure. There's one place it sounded like the rear yard coverage was 50% or 40%. Another place it sounded 60%. And I wasn't sure I understood the differences and sounded inconsistent, but I figure it's just something I'm not understanding about the code.
So currently we have a rear, sorry, it's hard to say, required rear yard maximum coverage, and we're increasing it. So I believe, I'm trying to go to my staff report that has that we're increasing it to 60% coverage of that area. Does that answer that question or?
Yeah, but there's a later section where it seems to be conflicting with that. So I'm trying to find out what I was talking to you.
Okay. If you have a page number or whatever you're looking at, I can go there as well.
Yeah. Charlie, how about I call on Paula while you look for that?
Sure, that sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, Paula, go ahead.
Hannah, I still have a hard time with number 1 in comparison to ADUs being allowed to be up to 1,000 square feet. And then the first one of removing ADUs from the 1,000 square foot requirement. I'm not quite sure what number 1 is.
And that's totally understandable. And the reason why we are removing the ADU from that calculation has to do with the fact that we're raising how large an accessory dwelling unit can be. So with this, if we left it as is, which is all accessory structures on a lot combined, a garage, an ADU, a shed, what have you, all combined, they need to be 1,000 square feet or under currently. With us proposing that an accessory dwelling unit can be up to 1,000 square feet, we felt it pertinent to change this and take that out, because basically how it would have been left is you can have an ADU that's 1,000 square feet and nothing else, or the garage that you have currently severely prohibits the size of your ADU that you can have.
Yeah, I missed the word combined. So I think that's where the clarification was. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And for Charlie's, I did find, so the required rear yard coverage currently, an ADU can cover 40% of that. And so we are increasing that to 60 as proposed.
Is that, I'm looking at the Exhibit A to the ordinance, and it's 5B. It says accessory structures may be located in the required rear yard, provided no more than 40% of it is covered. This is 5B in the Exhibit A to the ordinance.
Okay. And if that is as stated, that might be an error that wasn't struck through. But as approved or recommended for approval by P&Z, that item would be changed to rear yard coverage of 60%.
Did you say 50 or 60?
60, 60.
Okay, because I think it says that's somewhere else, and that's where I was getting confused. So maybe just a typo in there.
That's something that we can look at and clean up for second reading if necessary.
Okay. All right. And if I find it between now and then, I might just send you an email.
Okay, that's great.
Okay, thanks.
Hannah, can you give me some examples? I know you said something about basements, but I'm just having a hard time visualizing, how is a basement ever 55% of the square footage of a house? How is a basement more than a house?
So it's an interesting calculation there. And the 49% is not our current standard, cannot be more than 49% of the primary dwelling area. A big difference with some other codes is that we say the primary dwelling area, not the primary structure in its entirety. So, this is why I drew charts for it, because it got very complicated. So basically, if you have 1,000 square foot building and the primary area is upstairs and it's 500 square feet. And so they're taking their basement, which is also 500 square feet. That's half of the structure, but that's more than 49% of the 500 square feet of primary dwelling area. So technically that is only allowed to be roughly 250 square feet of ADU area. And that's where a lot of our issues were coming with applicants.
I'm just going to take your word for that because I don't understand that math at all.
Can I say in different words? If I have a 900 square foot house on the first floor, the main level, and I have a 900 square foot basement, so same exact footprint.
Yes.
Is that my understanding is you try to fix it so that's allowed?
Yes, exactly.
All right.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? I guess I just have one more. Were we finding a lot of people who wanted to make their property into an ADU that 850 did not work? That was just too small?
Most of the time that became an issue with conversions in-house of wanting to have larger areas. Yes.
And one more thing on the percentage, if for example, say I had I guess typically if somebody wanted to live like in the basement and they had the upstairs area, because the basement, you would not have the mechanical room as livable space. If we get it to 55%, aren't we kind of just making a duplex and then not having, I mean, if you take like example of 1,000 square feet up, 1,000 square feet down, isn't that more of in practice a duplex? And shouldn't we be potentially talking about impact fees? Because I know the big part of ADUs is a pretty dramatic reduction of impact fees. And so aren't people kind of trying to make a duplex, but yet getting ADU type fees?
So I understand what you're saying, and that has come up with Planning and Zoning Commission as well. And I think that's kind of a discussion for you guys to talk about as far as how you feel on the new size and this new possibility that you have an equal size ADU to the primary dwelling. From staff's perspective, we're not, as the proposed language stands, we're not allowing for an equal sized ADU to be detached, which presents in a planning state of mind a higher impact to the surrounding neighborhood. You're creating a larger structure and there's view shed things that come into mind. So we really are only allowing this kind of equal area of ADU to primary dwelling if the footprint is not increased. You could definitely say that this falls under a duplex-like category, but we placed conditions on it that staff feels and P&Z was comfortable with, so that the impacts of a duplex aren't quite there for the surrounding neighborhood, and it would function and for all intents and purposes look like a single family home.
So what would prevent, Hannah, sorry for all the questions, but what would prevent somebody from building a duplex and saying, oh, I'm not going to pay, you know, the $25,000 per unit duplex cost per side. I'm going to declare this as a single family, and one of them is going to be the primary, and one's going to be the ADU. What would prevent that?
So most of the time with what we see coming in with duplexes want to be larger than the size allowance, though we are tweaking that for an ADU currently. So planning staff, when applications like this come in, we really sit down and go through the options of, first, are you allowed to have a duplex in your zone? ADUs are allowed across the board, duplexes are not. So in our lower density residential areas, people are not allowed to technically have a duplex, and they're going to have to meet all of these standards that exist for an accessory dwelling unit. There is not as many standards for a duplex. So there's some choices, you know, kind of handoff choices that need to be made there. Also, accessory dwelling units, once you enter into that category, you're not able to use it for short-term rental purposes, whereas in a duplex you are. So a lot of times the choice between these two is kind of made by the intent of the owner. But first, if they're allowed to do it in the zone, which kind of weeds out quite a lot of possible duplexes also. That kind of got to your question, kind of went in a different direction. So let me know if you need further elaboration.
I'm just thinking like people like me think sometimes. Shelley.
Hannah, can you clarify too, when it says, and I'm looking at the tables in your staff report on that kind of demonstrate this when it was 49%. And it says, you talk about the percentage limit on the size of the primary dwelling. So when you say size of primary dwelling, that's a primary dwelling that exists after the ADU is created? Is that correct? Not the total size of the building, right?
Exactly. Yes. That's a big distinction between our current code and what a lot of other municipalities have. And something that's pointed out quite frequently that makes it very challenging is you have to minus the area of the ADU from the structure and then take 49% of what that number is.
So I think that speaks to Jonathan's question. It's not a duplex. You'd still have the primary dwelling is almost twice the size of the ADU. So it's not.
Yeah, thank you, Shelley. Appreciate that. That helps me.
Thank you, Shelley.
I just wanted to verify that I was understanding that correctly. Thanks.
All right, any other questions? All right, hearing none. Let's open this up to public comment. Anybody from the public? Seeing none. Wow, we had a boring meeting. We started, I think, with 21 attendees. We're down to 9. All right, our ratings are down, people. Come on. Councilor Davis, back for comments and/or a motion.
First, I have a comment. I've built a number of these ADUs for myself and for clients. And I greatly appreciate the changes. The 49% was always very awkward because oftentimes you have the basement is basically the same size as the upstairs, the main level. And we always kind of fought with that 49% thing, and oftentimes just lost square footage in the basement to accommodate it. So that makes great sense. 850 square feet or 849, I think. We always built at 849 because 850 was the max. You can never get anything more than just a really small bedroom in it. So this will really help out a lot to have 2 bedrooms. So now you could actually have somebody with their kid that's not sharing a bedroom with them. With that, I would make a motion to pass, I guess, ordinance number 8, series 2020, related to accessory dwelling units as proposed and recommended by staff.
Second.
I think that was moved by Steve and seconded by Tony.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Further conversation, Shelley. Muted.
I'd just like to say I'm really happy to see this move forward. I hope we can pass this tonight. There's been a lot of discussion on Housing Commission and also with P&Z and these were recommendations that also I came across in AARP actually had a document that they put out that I picked up at a conference somewhere, and it was just the benefits to the whole community, as well as seniors trying to age in place, but also people looking for lower cost units. It can help the affordability of housing on so many different levels in the community. And I think making them easier to build, easier to access for people just are good changes all the way around. And I fully support these. Thanks.
Thanks, Shelley. Any other comments? I guess I'll make a quick comment, and maybe this is something for P&Z to consider at a future date. But I have owned 2 ADUs, one currently in my house in my basement, and then another one above a garage in Cardiff, which I sold that property several years ago. But having that experience and seeing the type of tenant or tenants, it really does fulfill the affordability question a little bit. So a lot of this stuff is about inventory, not just about subsidy or affordable housing. You keep things small, they end up affordable. And I'm fine with 1,000 square feet. I would want to put something out there, and maybe for P&Z to consider a house like mine. For example, I have the ADU in the basement of my house, so it's within the primary structure dwelling. I also have a decent sized backyard, so I could have an attached ADU. And it really wouldn't impact. I have plenty of parking, and I guess I would just hope the P&Z or the Housing Commission at some point would bring forth. I mean, we are looking for density, we're looking for inventory, and so if there's an opportunity, I would not be opposed to have, with the right circumstances, and maybe mine is just a very unique circumstances, but having 2 ADUs per property doesn't feel wrong when it's in the right neighborhood and the right property. So I guess I'll just throw that out there. That has really nothing to do with what we're talking about other than it's ADU. And I would love to see even more progressive and aggressive ADU discussions as we continue to move these conversations forward. Any other comments? Okay. We have a motion by, I think, Rick, and second by Tony. Is that right? Steve.
Motion by Steve.
Motion by Steve, second by Tony. Thank you. Catherine, would you call the question?
Deb?
Yes.
How hard is it? to unmute?
Willman,
Yes. I said yes, sorry.
Voorhees,
Yes.
Gotis,
Yes.
Hershey,
No, I mean, yes.
Davis,
Charlie, you don't have to be sorry about your yes, and I'm also a yes.
Coe,
You're muted, Shelley.
Mute. Yes.
motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you, Hannah. That was great.
You guys.
Nice work.
Good job.
Please, the next time P&Z meets, let them know thank you also for their hard work. I know they probably struggled with a lot of these questions and put the work in that makes it easy for us to make these decisions.
And the Housing Commission. Thank them. as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paula.
I will do that. Thank you guys very much. Have a great evening.
You too.
All right, next item, item 14, ordinance 9 series of 2020, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Glenwood Springs, amending the 2020 appropriation ordinance to reflect actual revenues and expenditures during the first quarter of fiscal year 2020. First reading.
Yep. Hi again, everybody. So this is just housekeeping. We try to do these, we're going to try to do these quarterly so that your quarterly year-to-date reports make a little bit more sense instead of waiting until the end of the year. But from time to time, you guys will appropriate money that wasn't originally appropriated in the budget. In the first quarter, you directed us to establish in our general fund $100,000 for costs related to COVID-19. Most of that's been spent on PPE for the fire department, that kind of stuff. And you approved $350,000 to buy right-of-way for right-of-way acquisition on South Midland. So this is just formally appropriating those funds. The bottom two things are our budget is right when we did the last appropriation, but I should have unappropriated the original funds that we passed in the 2019 budget. So I don't think anybody really cares, except that our auditors at the end of the year are going to go back and they're going to reconcile everything. And it's going to look like we, appropriate $6 million for Two Rivers Park instead of $3 million. So this is just correcting that error on my part.
Charlie, question.
No, I motion if I can.
No.
No, then I won't.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Steve Davis.
So, Steve Boyd, what you're saying is that you made a mistake?
First time this year. First one.
I never thought I'd
get my motion in before they could say that, so.
All right, Rick, question.
Yeah, so Steve, has the new ERP sort of whetted your appetite to do this every quarter? Are we seeing a return on investment there?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see a return on investment there eventually. I don't know they're quite there yet, but
okay.
Yeah, we are up and running in the new ERP, and it's not all rainbows, butterflies, and unicorns yet, but I think we'll get there. But in the next regular meeting in May, you guys will see a quarterly report that has year-to-date numbers in it, and you'll be able to, have a little better visibility into how things are going during the year.
Great.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Sorry, Charlie, I didn't mean to cut you off, but this is an ordinance, so we do need to at least pretend to take public comment. So if there's no other council comments, or I'm sorry, council questions, we'll turn it over for public comment. Seeing none, I will now bring it back for Mr. Willman to do a motion, if he so chooses.
I move that we approve ordinance number 9, series of 2020, and cover up Steve's mistake.
Second.
Moved by Charlie, second by Steve. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, Catherine, please call the question.
Gotis,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Hershey,
Yes.
Willman,
Yes.
Coe,
Yes.
Voorhees,
Yes.
motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks, Steve.
Steve.
All right, item number 15. This is electronic signatures. What is this about? I did not read this at all.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, for not reading it. Appreciate that. In the interest of trying to make this kind of world we're living in right now a little bit more efficient for everybody, as well as just in general moving forward, the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act in Colorado, 2471.3101, allows for the use of electronic signatures on a variety of documents. This is a resolution that would permit the city to do that in those transactions that are recognized underneath the statute. The exception being that you can't use a DocuSign signature for a plat. That's one of the few instruments that you can't use it for. DocuSign is also the only one that the state is recognizing underneath the act to be able to be used, but this just gives some flexibility when, a great example is when if we go to closing on these loan documents with Alpine Bank for broadband, and we're still operating in a world where it's very hard to be there in person, or we need multiple sets of signatures from different people, gives us a way to do that. I think probably a lot of you have closed loans or other transactions with DocuSign in your personal lives. This just gives us the ability to do that in kind of the professional world of the city.
Any questions for Carl? Paula.
Carl, will this become the standard way we'll sign most documents, or will this be just kind of out of the ordinary circumstance?
I think probably as a matter of practice, when we're back live, we'll still be doing live signatures for the most part. It just gives that option. And it also, frankly, when you're dealing with timing on certain issues, it's nice to be able to not have to overnight materials back and forth.
I feel bad for him.
I'm sorry, Tony, I didn't hear you.
Sorry, I had a quick question, Carl. But I didn't raise my hand because it wasn't working.
Okay.
Do you want me to raise?
No, I'm
No,
good.
go ahead, Tony.
I can't. Okay, it was screwed up. Sorry. So, is this electronic signature something similar to what you do in legal documents, or is it some sort of separate thing, or is it just a matter of like if you wrote, /S/S Carl Hanlon? Is that what it is?
No, this is more like, I don't know if you've used DocuSign to execute documents before. It's literally that, where you have to go through a registration process that you are who you say you are and have the credentials to go with it to do that signature. So like say for the mayor, we would have him go through that so that he could sign documents as the mayor, not just as Jonathan Godis, who probably has his own account out there with DocuSign to be able to execute documents. So it could be used in most any circumstance where both sides agree that an electronic signature is okay.
So Jonathan would have his own signature for this only. Right. Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
Steve.
Well, I just wonder if in this ordinance, if it shouldn't have the wording in it that it's like when more practical or something. It doesn't seem like it ought to be something where it's just automatic every time, but when the practicality would, rise to the occasion of that. Not a big deal. Not trying to throw a stone at it, but.
So just maybe modifying section 2 to say at the end of that where it says Glenwood Springs Municipal Charter and Code, when something to the effect of when it is more practical to do so.
I think so.
Okay.
Is that
sounded like a motion?
That's so do we need to take public comment on this, Carl?
You don't have to. It's a resolution.
Okay.
But it's up to you.
Well, no, that's fine. I can't imagine the now down to 8 attendees, 7 of which are probably employed by the city, are probably chomping at the bit to comment on e-signature. I guess I would say, if we're in the comments section, that I would vigorously oppose that, Councilor Davis, because I think we have an opportune time to be able to move to the 21st century, and I do there's about 3 companies that do this. There's eSign, there's DocuSign, there's another one that I've used before. And so it's interesting that DocuSign is the preferred vendor because they're all private companies. But I get so frustrated when I have to deal like the state of Indiana or some place that will not allow you to sign anything. Everything has to be a wet signature, and you have to spend $50 overnighting stuff. You know, just like we started off this meeting talking about how we have a lot of participation because of this online format. You know, I think to limit ourselves and to say only when it's applicable or only when it's absolutely necessary. I think e-signatures, regardless of whether, and maybe this is just me, so this is not a personal attack against you, Steve, but I think, you know, if we are going to be say authorizing either myself or Mayor Pro Tem Shelley Kopp or staff to e-signify anything, let's just make it a common practice of the city of Glenwood Springs and take us into the 21st century. Because whether I'm sitting at home and Catherine, and this does happen with some regularity, is saying, you know, Jonathan, can you come down today to City Hall to sign a document? Or, you know, there's something last minute, like, I don't know that a wet signature versus an e-signature is that significantly different. And so I guess my hope would be that we just adopt this as a practice, and that we authorize staff and myself and the Mayor Pro Tem to be able to do this as a normal course of business.
Well, I can see you're wanting to pick a fight with me here.
I'm not. I'm going to vote for whatever. I'm going to vote for whatever.
No, I'm okay with that. You know, it just seems like, well, I don't even care. So
I guess I don't either, really.
It's just not that big a deal. You know, when we're on the dais and you've got documents signed up, it just seems nice to have a wet signature on it. But you know, obviously when you're not on the dais and there's things that need to be signed, then I've seen absolutely no reason why you couldn't DocuSign that. And I know you in particular are very comfortable with DocuSign because you do them all the time on real estate contracts, and you do more real estate contracts than anybody else here. So I'm not going to battle over this at this point in time. I just think sometimes it's nice to have a wet signature. So.
And most of the time, it's just as easy for me to sign it when Catherine puts it on my desk at night, and it's very easy. The only time it's a little challenging, there's been probably 2 or 3 times that she's like, "Hey, can you come down here?" And that's probably happened 10 times, and maybe only 2 or 3 times has it been a slight inconvenience for me not to. So that's, yeah, it's a slight inconvenience. So
yeah, we don't want to inconvenience you. So
I appreciate
Set
that.
you up a home office in the city hall there, your little.
I will. I've joked with Deborah about that, and she looks me sternly in the eye, and there is no hint of laughter in her eye when she says, "You will never have an office here."
All right.
Nicely.
Okay, so
public comment.
No, we're not going to do public comment. I think if we don't have to, we'll just open it for a motion. You did have a motion. Did you have a motion, Steve?
I can do a motion. Yeah,
Okay.
I would make a motion that resolution 2020-19A, adopting a policy for the use of electronic signature. I can't quite see it there. Resolutions, contracts, and other instruments requiring the city signature.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved by Steve, seconded by Paula. Catherine, would you take roll call?
Davis,
Yes.
Stepp,
Yes.
Hershey,
Yes.
Voorhees,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Willman,
Yes.
Godus.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Steve, for enduring my little diatribe. All right, next item up. Item number 16, amendment to city manager contract. You're muted, Deborah.
I would just like to say thank you. The amendment to my contract, it assumes that I would have gotten the 3% COLA, and then it takes my salary down to $150,000 just in, we're trying to be proactive and cut staff expenses, and I wanted to be part of that. It's not much more complicated than that. Carl, are there any nuances?
Yeah, that pretty much, I think that's the whole thing in a nutshell. It does, that temporary reduction ends at the end of the year, but normally you would be looking at the next year's budget and salaries anyway ahead of that time, so it shouldn't be an issue. We're just a little late getting this one done this year.
Thank you, Deborah.
Charlie, questions?
No, a comment, not a question.
Fair enough. Go for it.
So Deborah, when you talked to me on the phone about doing this, I appreciate your offer to do this and taking the lead, knowing that there were going to be other changes to salaries and positions that were upcoming. And I applaud you for taking that lead and leadership in this city. I believe that, you know, if you look at a lot of companies when they're starting to go under, they're looking for the most expensive leader to run them through that period of time because they want the best quality people doing that, and they're paying big bucks to do that. And I'd be prepared to pay the big bucks to do it, and appreciate you taking this reduction. As with our salaries, when we talked about reducing our salaries earlier tonight, this should go as until until the end of the year, unless the economic circumstances change. And then I want to look at where we are and talk about what we do about this. But I appreciate your offer to do this, and I think it's very gracious.
Shelley, and then Rick.
I won't go on too long, but Deborah, again, I echo Charlie's comments. Really appreciate this. You're showing good leadership as usual, and leading your staff and getting out ahead of these cuts that unfortunately we had to do kind of across the board. Hopefully it won't go till the end of the year, but certainly appreciate this proposed amendment to contract, and we'll see how the rest of the year moves forward. Thank you.
Rick.
Yeah, what Charlie and Shelley said, you know, Deborah, you've been magnificent. Really appreciate your steady hand here. And what amazes me is that in the midst of a place where many people are losing their heads, that you're looking down the road, you're looking at opportunities, and you're looking at what it would take to get the city back together again. So it's really magnanimous of you to defer at least some of your salary, I guess lose some of your salary would be a better word for the duration. And just want you to know that I believe everybody on council really appreciate this gesture, and I think the city staff does too. So thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Paula.
Once again, you sacrificed, Deborah, and it's deeply appreciated. And I really wish to also ask you to please take time for yourself, because I know that you're not doing that as much as you should. And you need that with as much work as you have taken on and what you've driven so far. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'll just throw my 2 cents in. Deborah, I think when this first thing was starting, you know, her and I conversed quite a bit, and she offered this up significantly before. This was not I need to do this because I'm going to be asking my staff to do this. This was her saying, just the timing wise, I think it's important for everybody to know and the community to know that this was something that she said, I need to do because I might at some point have to do it. And that some point came, I think, sooner than we really had anticipated and had hoped it would come. But she was willing to do this in the vacuum of not knowing if she would be asking a similar sacrifice of her staff. And so this is a staff-wide sacrifice that she has made on behalf of herself and her staff. And so it's tough for everybody. The ability to see ahead and to make this course correction on a slow moving ship means that I hope 3 or 6 months from now, we're not going to have to make a radical turn right or left and do dramatic things. We might have to, but I know the actions that Deborah has taken on behalf of herself and the staff in the last several weeks, and these really hard decisions are hopefully going to help prevent dramatic and significant cuts in the future. So thank you, Deborah, and thank you for the hard decisions you've had to make. I know it's to echo Paula's comments, take some time, because I know these things weigh really heavy on you. So Steve.
Well, I reflect, obviously, every comment that was made. I just can't, and I started off by just saying thank you, Deborah, and I can't, I sat here today and I reflected back on all the trials and tribulations since you went to work here, starting out with the bridge and staff and management and one thing after another. And I just hope to hell that there's some moment in your career here in Glenwood that we can have peace and tranquility and just an easy, like even just 6 months would be nice. So far, that hadn't happened for you, but we certainly appreciate all your efforts.
Thank you.
All right. What is this? Is this a?
Mr. Mayor, I reluctantly move to approve the contract amendment.
A second. Moved by Charlie, seconded by myself. Further conversation? All right. Catherine, please take roll call. You're on mute. And so is Shelley.
Okay, Hershey,
I pass.
Stepp,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Godas,
Yes.
Voorhees,
Yes.
Willman,
Yes.
Davis.
Affirmative.
Motion passes unanimously.
Deborah.
I just want to take a moment to say thank you. There is no place I'd rather be than here right now with the staff that I have and the council that I have and the city. So I'm very lucky and thank you. And the city attorney too. Thank you, Carl. And the cat.
All right. That's difficult. All right. Item number 17, resolution to supporting the designation of mineral resource areas as areas of state interest and adoption of additional regulations related to mining operations by the Garfield County, Colorado Board of County Commissioners. Carl.
Thanks. This is really, there's a memo that runs through what's going on over in Garfield County. They're adopting some additional 1041 regs related to mining. These are county-wide regulations, and hopefully it'll kind of set up the county to move forward in a positive way. This resolution is just a resolution in support of those. I think we'll likely reach out to our various municipalities and ask them to support the county in adoption of these as well and encourage them to adopt them. It's just good policy moving forward. And again, I think it's super important to recognize this applies to the entire county, regardless of what might be happening closer to home here in Glenwood. So with that, hopefully the memo does a pretty good job of covering it up. Richard out of my office has been taking the lead on a lot of this stuff. So I will confess I am not as well versed in the exact changes that are being proposed by the county, although it's a move forward. Barbara Green, who has worked with us in the past as well as an attorney, is helping them in the crafting of those regulations. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. This is really not binding. It's just a resolution of support.
Questions, comments? I guess I will open it up for anybody to make a motion for support.
I would move that we support the county's efforts. I'm not exactly sure what language I should be using at this point.
Just that you move to approve resolution 2020-20.
2020-20. There's a certain verbal convergence with 2020-20. So
I don't see it, Rick.
I second the motion.
you don't
All right.
see it.
2020.
I would know we're 4 days short of 2020.
Been moved by Rick, seconded by Shelley. Further comments? All right, seeing none, Catherine, please call roll.
Willman,
Yes.
Voorhees,
Yes.
Stepp,
Yes.
Hershey,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Godus,
Yes.
Davis.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Reports from the city manager, Deborah.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to clarify that on the previous vote, I abstained. I don't think that the city manager should have to take a pay cut. I did not vote no, but I abstained. It was unanimous 6-0 though.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification, Tony.
Thank you.
I think Deborah does too.
Well, I don't know if she does or not.
I'm not going to put words in her mouth. Jeez, that was some that was some full-on mansplaining right there. She was just
Thank you.
muted. She was muted, so I spoke for her.
Thank you. I apologize for the interruption.
Thank you.
I apologize for speaking for you, Deborah.
Okay. We are more than likely going to get a $150,000 grant from CDPHE for the recycling center downtown. We applied, we bought Western Petroleum with landfill funds. We explained to you guys we were going to go after these funds. So we scored highly. We're very competitive. The next step in the process is you guys have to approve a resolution before the end of next week saying you're okay with the Western Petroleum site being a recycling center. So
Oh,
I'm
do-
asking if you guys are, that you give permission for Jonathan to sign the resolution if Carl and I are okay with it. We just didn't have time to get it done because we found out yesterday.
Yeah, I was gonna say this literally came up in the last 24 hours. Keeping in mind that while you're designated, it would be contingent on you getting that grant funding, and you would still have one last opportunity to turn down that grant funding. So it's kind of like when you do a resolution for the FMLA grants. It's kind of the same process.
We still need to do community outreach, which we will intend to do to kind of get how everyone feels about it. I know it's a little hard right now, but we'll figure something out to talk to the neighbors. There's a $25,000 match that is required from the landfill. Now, the landfill doesn't have a huge amount of reserves, but we feel like we can do the $25,000. The landfill the recycling center downtown should cost just about $175,000. And Matt said he'll scale it back to be within that if we need to. And one of the reasons he would really like to move the recycling center downtown is that where it is at the landfill, it would be very useful if that could become the leachate pond. And Matt, correct me if I'm wrong here, but we need to move where it is, and that is an ideal location. So it's kind of a win-win for the landfill. We think residents will be happy to have a downtown recycling center again. It was very sad when we decided to close it. The community was not happy with us. So Matt, do you have anything to add to that?
No, you got it. It's leachate, just so you know. And where the current leachate pond is the place where we're 75 feet over air space, where we're kind of out of compliance, and they want us to grade that area into the existing leachate pond. So it has to move. In our 2 locations, there's one very expensive spot, and this is potentially a very affordable spot to move the leachate pond to. So it kind of benefits us in 2 ways. The recycling center goes back into town, which is a good public benefit, and it provides us a less expensive place to potentially move the pond to. So kind of a double thing.
Jonathan, are you there?
I muted myself because I didn't trust myself.
So Deborah, are you looking for a motion or a head nod or thumbs up or what to go forward with that, which I think is very important for the community?
I think a motion giving Jonathan the ability to sign the resolution if Carl and I are okay with it.
Yeah, I would make that motion, and
I'd second that.
All right. Motion by Steve, seconded by Rick. I see a bunch of hands up. Tony.
I can't approve this $25,000. The community misses a lot of things. I bet they miss polo over by the high school, but they don't have that anymore. So we don't need a recycling center. We have curbside recycling. I have mixed stream recycling, and they come to my back door and take it. A lot of this is just feel good, go over there and drop off some cans and drive your Suburban over there from Rick's house, not Rick's house, but my house maybe, and drive far away. It's silly. It's not needed. I wish we hadn't purchased this land. I voted no. I wish we had that $250,000. Which councilman on this dais, this virtual dais, is going to look that employee in the face and say, look, you don't have a job anymore because our revenues are down 50% and we wasted $250,000 on this property. I would move to sell it if we could, but I don't think anyone would buy it. But I'm not going to, and oh, if we spend $25,000, look, we get a free $150,000. Well, that's circular reasoning. I don't want to spend $25,000. I don't support this. We have a recycling center at the dump. We have recycling because garbage trucks pick it up for you. Again, it's a feel-good thing. It's a nice social thing, although in this COVID world, I don't know what that is anymore. So I'm opposing this, and I'm going to vote no. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Paula?
Just to think you said this, Deborah, but that 25,000 would come out of landfill reserves, right? Is that correct? Yeah. And Matt, is there a setup, or would there be a setup at this recycling place to for any cash transactions or anything like that that come with recycling sometimes? I just can't remember. We don't have that out there right now at the landfill, right?
The only thing we'd be able to charge for, the grant will come with the stipulations. It still has to be free recycling.
Okay.
Free recycling doesn't include, we take fluorescent bulbs for $1 a bulb to do the recycling on them, e-waste, those kinds of things that cost money for us to really get rid of. So it would still be free recycling center minus those few items that we are allowed to charge for. Does that answer your question?
It does. And then the cost of the city transporting the recycling to wherever it goes, I imagine some back to the landfill, like cardboard, that is equal to what we're doing right now with what's happening out at the landfill?
So the cost for transporting the cardboard back to the landfill would be slightly higher than it is right now. We pay basically $75 for the recycling bin to be hauled from the lower portion up to the upper portion, which seems ridiculous. We would actually start looking at how to do it ourselves, so that we could take potentially that in-house and not have to pay a hauler to do that. Glass will still get hauled to Eagle, plastic will still get hauled to Eagle, and the state refunds us for most of those transportation fees. So our fees or costs for the recycling center are basically nailed down to the cost to have a tech there to help people make sure it's sorted correctly, so that when we do haul glass to Eagle, that it doesn't get returned because there's trash in it, which would be a costly endeavor. It's cheaper just to have somebody there manning it.
Okay.
So.
And when, like I noticed in the pricing that you recently gave us, there was like, huge amounts of cardboard coming in from big companies. That still goes directly to the dump, that type of stuff. That just bypasses everything else, right?
Yeah, this would be for the local residents, for the small people. The big haulers, the Waste Management, Mountain Waste, actually just Mountain Waste, would be bringing us those cardboards still straight up to the landfill, and we'd be putting those right in the pile for the composting.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Charlie.
Well, first, I think, thank you for Deborah and Matt for getting this potential grant. I think it's a great thing and I appreciate what you've done. Secondly, I think we ought to consider, and I know we talked about this when we bought the land, because particularly given the Basalt and other places aren't able to maintain their centers, whether we allow non-city residents to do it for free. I think we want to talk about if it's reasonable to charge for that, but again, we don't want to get administrative costs exceeding what we get in from revenue. And then I want to comment on what Councilman Hershey said, and that is, I disagree 100%. This is a feel-good thing. One of the things when I was campaigning a year ago, the people kept saying to me is, are you going to get the landfill back? Are you going to get the landfill back? Are you going to get the landfill back? We provide a lot of services to our community and our citizens, roads, public water, and things like that. And this is another one of those services for people who do not want to pay the premium charges that the hauling companies charge to take the waste away. They'd rather bring it in to the center themselves and save that money. And, you know, I'm sorry, as I tell my grandkids, because I'm a recycle Nazi, this is for the future, and I think we need to do this.
Shelley.
I completely agree with what Charlie said, and I definitely support this. It's I do have a question for Matt. Can we accommodate electronics recycling at this site, whoever our contract is with?
We'll have an electronics recycling collection bin there still for whoever the recycler is to come collect those materials from that location and bring them to their main facility. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And one comment then I'd like to add on top of what Charlie said is I do feel like the recycling that we are able to accomplish through, and that our staff has worked really hard on through owning and running South Canyon Landfill, is superior to some of the services that come along with the trash haulers. They're just not in the business of recycling. And I think the city has a motivation through running the landfill and wanting to lengthen and maximize the life of the landfill to do all the recycling that we can. So I think this is a great move, and thank you for staff.
Matt, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to kind of go on what Shelley was saying there just a little bit. You know, the curbside recycling is great. It's nice for people to be able to have that. But there are statistics out there. You could talk to Waste Management, Mountain Waste. When you single stream something, basically 30 to 40% of that goes back into the landfill. It's things that people don't understand what they're allowed to recycle. It's trash. It's the recycling itself gets commingled with food waste, and then it's covered in the food waste, and they can't actually recycle the cardboard. So doing it this way is it's more efficient and effective than doing curbside single stream. Yes, a single stream is way easier for the recyclers to do. They pick it up, they put it in a truck, they bring it to their sorting facility, they dump it on the ground, and people figure out what they can or cannot actually recycle, which is one way to do it. It makes it easier for the public to go ahead and do it that way. But it's not as effective, which is why we are fairly cost effective in what we do. And when they had all the sharps show up at Garfield County Recycling Facility and they shut that one down also, our recycling went up immediately at the landfill. In the last 2 weeks, you know, you guys let us pass a resolution that we could charge $4 per waste bag coming up, so people could recycle, they could bring their household waste, and we could put it in our, 4-yard container, and we'll haul it up there for them. We went from 1 4-yard container per day, every other day, to the guys are hauling 3 or 4 of them per day up to the landfill right now. So people are obviously dropping their curbside and coming to us, recycling, and then using that cheaper option for them to have household trash be deposited for them instead of doing curbside. that has just blown up in the last 3 weeks. So I think everything that we've done so far is A, cost effective, and B, has been a benefit to the residents because they are using it. Now, is it a great use of taxpayer money? Do we need one in town? Is Tony kind of right on this conversation? You know, you could go back and forth with that all day long. Moving the recycling back in town, in essence, could save me $250,000 from one pond area to the next pond area in design. So when we kind of go through this globally and look at what's going on and what the landfill needs, it's probably actually a cost balance at the end of the day from trying to build something where it shouldn't really go, because CDA-PHE is going to require us to have it happen in the next few years. So I'm trying to look at everything as a whole, not just one thing at one time. It's what does that one thing benefit us in the long run in another location?
Rick.
I am so lucky to be able to hear all this intelligence be brought to bear. And the idea that it's another example of this community being proactive and managing its future. The broadband, excellent sort of reference point. But this too, I think, will mean a lot to people who live here. 50% decrease when we took it out to South Canyon. Matt says that this really will be cost effective for us as we think about the capability it gives us at the landfill and the ability to sort of manage our future going forward. I know recycling isn't a very lucrative business right now, but it really means a lot to people that live in this community. So good job, Matt and Deborah. I'm going to be proactive in being proactive, thinking about your proactivity and sort of moving that grant to get us to this place. So, you know, it's a triple P, and thank you. I'm going to vote yes.
Thanks, Rick. All right, anybody else? Well, I've had my say on this topic before, so we probably need to go over that. Catherine, let's take a vote.
Voorhees,
Yes.
Hope,
Yes.
Step,
Yes.
Hershey,
No.
Godus,
No.
Willman,
Yes.
Davis,
Let's see, how many was that? Yes.
motion passes.
You just don't get it.
All right.
That is all I have.
Okay, Carl.
I really don't have much of anything other than what we've got in exec session. I do want to say thank you guys to making this work. I know the land use hearings are going to be hard, and I appreciate that. You know, I think the staff and especially Jen and I, we view that as critical that we keep those applications moving forward as part of the bigger picture recovery. So I know it's awkward, but I appreciate you bearing with us with that. So that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. All right, any correspondence incoming, outgoing? All right, hearing none, seeing no hands, I will, we need somebody to read us out. Not adjourning the meeting. Does somebody want to, how do I, sorry, Carl. Usually somebody hands this to one of the counselors.
Yeah,
I've got it.
Script for the
I've got
executive session.
You got it, Steve?
I got it.
Cool.
I, Steve Davis, move to go into executive session and conduct a conference with the city manager and city attorney for the purposes of discussing the city's purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of real property, determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiators, and instructing negotiators to conduct a conference with the city attorney to receive legal advice in accordance with CRS 24-6-402 4A, B, and E related to RMR and the 27th Street Bridge.
And
Looking for-
actually, we probably sent out an old one, Steve.
Oh, great.
The acquisition of the property for the fire station, the Ross litigation. What is the other one I'm forgetting, Deborah?
So you want me to read all that again?
No, it's same stuff, but I just want to
Murphy.
clarify. What's that?
MOC.
And then I would also ask Steve if you would amend to the end of that motion and to adjourn the regular meeting at the end of the executive session, because we're going to move to another Zoom meeting and that just cleans this one up and closes it.
Yeah, and to adjourn this meeting at the end of the executive session. Is that what you wanted?
Yep, perfect.
All right,
This-
thanks.
This motion was sent to me at 5:40 PM tonight, so.
All right, it's April 16th, 2020. The time is 9:31 PM. For the record, I'm presiding officer, Mayor Jonathan Godis. As required by the open meetings law, this executive session is being
Right.
electronic.
Hang on, Jonathan. Two things.
Yes.
One, you didn't take a vote.
Oh,
And we need a second.
is there a second to Steve's motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 6-1, it passes. Counselor Hershey opposes.
All right, and then I'm going to make this even more complicated. I
I
believe.
didn't oppose. I
Oh,
didn't oppose.
I'm sorry. I saw the head nod.
Alyssa, I believe we're going to get a new Zoom meeting request, right? That just got sent out. So you guys are going to close out of this meeting and jump into the next one, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
And then I'll read us in at that point.
Exactly. Thank you.
Can we take just a couple of minutes before we jump into the other one?
No.
No? Okay.
Yeah, it'll be quick, Rick.
Okay, real quick.
All right.